Heiner, guten Morgen, guten Abend.
Es war schön, dass wir dieses Gespräch
Guten Abend.
Ich danke.
Is it dark already where you are? The days are still short. Okay.
Excuse me, did you say anything?
I was just asking whether it's already getting dark where you are. Ist das dunkel?
It is all over dark. I mean, I'm in the middle of the big shit of darkness. That's why I have a lamp.
It's still dark here also. Not quite sunrise. So how are you? And what's on your mind, Heiner?
My session in about 18 hours about the Earth Odyssey on how we can make a difference. And I actually wanted to stay in the background, carve some thoughts, and just make sure that you are peaceful and listening to each other.
Today, you mean, here?
Yeah, sure.
How are you going to help us do that?
I'm just observing.
Okay.
And if it's getting too tough, I put my video on.
Okay, that will be our signal.
Oh, yeah, that will be the big last warning. No, I'm actually doing very well. We try with our Earth Odyssey to really put all the issues onto the table, like values and morals, orders and schemas. And I try to be constructive and strong tomorrow. So I'm working like always beside, but I have an eye on you, especially in the seasons and the time seasons. So I'm hoping that a few people will come tonight, and I'll stay on backstage. Over.
So I missed a part of what you said, but I'll hopefully get it back during the recording. So I'm not going to make you repeat it. But welcome, Jaswinder. Welcome, Kayla. Welcome, Glenn. So my understanding is Doug did not have any session this week. Probably will not have a session tomorrow. And probably next weekend also.
Yes, is Doug taking some time off the internet altogether?
That's what he announced, right? Hey, Glenn, your microphone level seems low to me. Does that seem like it to anyone else?
I don't know. I can try to adjust it.
And we haven't seen Tis in quite a while. Welcome, Tis. So some of you were not here to hear Heiner's check-in, really brief this morning. So Heiner says he's here to make sure that we are civil and able to get along. And if we're not, then Heiner will intercede.
Are you
looking forward
guys
to that.
hearing some strange sounds?
Yeah, I'm hearing some chirping. Somebody is chirping.
Yeah. Some kind of
Was
maybe it's
you,
just
Winder?
Winder.
Yeah, just Winder. I think
it's
your
just Winder.
microphone is chirping now. You sound like chipmunks.
That's happened before. Hello, Mr. Reed.
Is my chipmunk sound all right?
No, Alex, you're fine on your sound now. It's someone else this time.
Okay, I'll just go and turn off my fan and I'll be back.
Yep. Well, my list of things to talk about is getting longer and longer. But I'll mention that after we do some check-ins. Yes, Winder, are you complete with your check-in? Or no, Heiner, are you complete with your check-in? Or would you like to do so now that we have about 8 people on?
I'm fine.
All right. Thank you, Heiner. Just Winder, your option. Well, you're still chirping, Just Winder. For some reason, your microphone is still not serving you well.
I think I am a problem. Find out.
It's
What to
humorous,
do.
but not very informative, unfortunately. I hope you'll hear this in the recording and know what we're hearing. Kayla, would you like to go optionally?
Hey everybody, it's good to see you. Happy holidays to everyone. I'm mixing dog food, so you'll have to excuse me. Things are fine. I haven't seen my kids for a week because they're with their dad. Work is great. I'm elevating to operations manager sometime next year. I'll be studying for my PNC exam later today and also getting some paperwork together for escrow. So I bought a house, you know, with the help of my parents, of course. This is going to be my first house. So I'm extremely excited. I feel very great up. Aside from living the artistic lifestyle, this is just like to the next level. So I'm excited. And I'm very excited to hear what everybody here has to say. And with that, I'm complete.
Thank you, Kayla. Glenn, your option.
Yeah, hey guys. Yeah, I'm in pretty much a holiday Christmas mode. So it's been a quiet week at home. Some snow came today, which is nice. It brightens up the terrain. Hasn't been much snow this year. Haven't really been following very much in the last few weeks and some other stuff, but yeah, just thought I'd hop in today and see what comes up.
Thank you, thank you. Tees, your option. Okay. Alex, your option.
Opt-in, optional check-in.
Yes.
It's wet in Australia because of the rainy season, and every Christmas it rains here in Cairns for some reason. But I got shopping done today, and it was cheaper than on Christmas Day or the day before Christmas Day. So Boxing Day specials. Go out and buy some. Save your money until after Christmas and buy all your presents. Okay, that's it for me. Check in.
Okay, thank you, Alex. Joel, everyone else has checked in already. Your option, if you'd like to.
I'm doing good. Nice to be here. Good to see you all. So.
All right, so I'll just mention that this holiday season, I actually gifted myself a new PC. So I'm on this new PC. It's an experiment. I ordered a nice little tiny, it's about 4 inches by 4 inches by about maybe 2 inches. and it's the best PC I have of all the 9 or 10 PCs I have in the house. I loaded it up with 64 gigs. So it's got 2 terabytes of solid state memory. So we'll see how it works. It should be much more stable than some of my other ones. So if something is glitchy, it's because I haven't configured it properly yet. Anyway, happy holidays to everyone. Tees, you are back. So I was checking to
Yes.
see if you would like to optionally check in.
Yes, I was double in the chat. So I heard you double, so I had to close one of my two being aware. But I'm still adjusting. So it takes time in my mind to really be with you all. So take some time. So
To really
come
be
later.
what? I missed that word.
It takes some time to be with you. I'm not with you yet, so I'm still. My mind has to adjust to the system.
To be
So
richer?
I come later.
Okay,
I can't come yet.
okay. I still don't think I got the word. Did anybody get that word from Tees? I thought it meant richer.
I think you just said he'll be with us later. Couldn't be with us just yet. Maybe
Yeah, I
some
got
other
that
stuff was
sense. I
happening.
just didn't make sense out of that one single word. But hopefully I'll get back.
Sounded like habitual.
Yeah, richer or ritual. Yeah. Okay. I was actually observing over the last several weeks that sometimes when we have these reasonably technical discussions regarding protocols and technology and platforms and guidelines, that sometimes that actually turns some people into statues and their eyes glaze over and they lose some interest. I also note that sometimes when we get too deep into the human system side, with incidents and triggers and feelings and reactions, sometimes that's also similarly an opportunity for people to tune out, those who are not quite so deep into sort of the human system side. So I just thought, is there a way that I could actually try and balance that a little bit? So let me know if any of that is true for you, and some balancing needs to be done. I was thinking perhaps, we could alternate on a week by week basis, because there was one time we talked about RFCs a lot. We talked about agreements. We talked about brick building. So that was, a bit more on the technology side, less so on the people side. Although in my mind, they're all interrelated. Okay, but to some people it might sound like that. And so I think, some people did glaze over during that session. But I was just checking also to see that in my mind, the arc of this whole board raising conversation includes all those as very necessary steps. So that's why I try to sort of bring it, but not too forcefully and not too insistently, okay? So that's just a preface to what I'm about to say. So in both categories, I have a few topics. Last week at the end of the session, when we talked about Barry and his experience with Bebe and EOST, the last two thoughts that I ended that session with were shame and transparency. Now, it's unfortunate Barry's not here, at least for now. But I thought that that incident, and probably many other incidents, it's tough to unravel when we have these really, really strong influence from shame that in some ways butt up against, my preference, not insistence, but preference for transparency. So anyway, those are a couple of topics that I thought I might throw out there on the table if anybody wants to continue that conversation, okay? Also, separately, in the human system side, Barry mentioned in an article earlier this week that he thought there were two models of GCC. And that's always a very provocative way to pose a question. So almost immediately when somebody says there's only these two models, then, the hair on the back of my neck goes up. So I just wanted to see if anybody remembered that post and see if that was of interest also. So that's more on the human system side. On the tool and protocol and agreement side, I've also said that, with the RFC for agreements and decisions, that appears to me like a reasonably solid first brick. And so there's a possibility we can build on that. So we can actually see what other bricks can we lay down. Can we have bricks around behavior? Can we have bricks around attendance here within these sessions, about documents, about how we take notes, that sort of thing. Personally, I'm about to say my very strong preference is to get off of Facebook for any reasonable, sensible, written interaction, okay? So I'm primarily going to transition to using Facebook as a signaling medium, but I will try and actually put more thoughts either in my own personal blog or in Zulip. And I really appreciate that some of you have actually joined me on Zulip. Zulip, I feel, is a much better conversation platform. So if there's anything worthwhile to respond to that is not just a one-liner, I'm more likely to put it in Zulip and invite you to join me there, okay? I'm also likely at some point to put things in the brain, and I will then refer to them if the structure of the brain I feel is necessary for me to untangle my own thoughts. So I'm going to see whether any of that is palatable to any of the rest of you. I do think that it's a discomfort to some to acquire and transition to new tools and platforms. But with all the stuff that Facebook does to messaging and privacy and their stances on supporting fake news and their inability to actually support threaded discussions well, and how badly the search works, I've given it a try, and I'm no longer interested in trying in Facebook to have written interactions. So I'm going to minimize that over the course of a few weeks or months. Okay. So as I mentioned, I'm going to transition more to Zulip. I'm going to transition more to the brain, and hopefully then use those to really have some more meaningful interactions. I think with Facebook, it's less pleasant for me to have pleasant interactions on Facebook. So if we wanted to do some more on the tool and protocol side, I thought, building bricks, talking about behaviors and possibly new agreements was another whole set of things. And so I've been speaking a long time. I mentioned things on the human system side as well as on the tool system side. So I wanted to see if any of that was worth following up, or whether you guys also have additional topics we should put here on the table. Over.
Yeah, I got a few thoughts about that because I listened to some of one of the sessions that I hadn't attended, and so my impression has been that for quite a long time now, the art of the barn racing conversation seems to have been what I would call meta communication. So it's been a great deal of talking about talking, and if we put it into the agile model, which we've worked at it through those lens a few times, could be said that we have been in a sort of retrospective mode for a very long time now. I did feel a little bit like, eyes glazing over, in the sense that it was a lot of the same things that came up again and again. So I've been quite interested in this, with writing something based on the meetings, but if it's sort of the same things that we've gone through so many times, then I don't feel personally that interested in writing based on it. Because I mean, it seems that there's certain clear agreements that have sort of naturally formed. But when it comes to specific protocols about behaviors, maybe that's an obstacle if it's too much of it. Because if there's too many, you know, guidelines, then that can be stifling. So on the one hand, you can have a model basically of one meeting space where it's quite open, and then you can have more specific guidelines. Anyway, Jaswinder, you can say what you're thinking. I'm not quite finished, but go for it. Well, I don't think it works, your microphone, Jaswinder, unfortunately.
Jaswinder, I think we're still hearing chirping. Yes,
Yeah,
definitely.
it's chirping.
Is there a way for you to change microphones or unplug it and then plug it back in and see what might happen?
Sounds like Donald Duck.
Yeah, we're
Okay.
not able to understand you at all.
But
If you
anyway,
begin now,
I'll
Mickey
just
Duck.
round it up then, because yeah. So I guess I feel that maybe that's a bit of a dead horse to sort of the meta communication. At least how I feel it would be really interesting to go into some sort more substantial issues. I guess questions of more substance to actually go into. It could be like a model for collective intelligence. I've got lots of ideas there. I think we all have. Could be the question of how to use this other tool, Sulit, the brain. That's an interesting one. Could be kind of cataloging certain basic beliefs that everyone has. That could be an interesting one. And obviously the co-visioning that we touched upon a little bit before, like a larger vision of, let's say, what a community like the GCC could become, looking a couple of years into the future, perhaps even imagining global super communities similar to this idea of a community of impact. Let's say something where you have a flywheel effect of generative creativity and creating new insights through a generative dialogue process, and you combine that with personal development, and you can combine that with various events, digital events such as these, and then at some time in the future, you know, meetups after COVID, etc. When things get more normal, that's also, you know, interesting visions to explore. So all those topics I think are quite interesting. I just hope that we won't just go back to the meta communication and just repeat the same things, because I think we've gone through a lot of that stuff, and I think some valuable insights have emerged, but we sort of have to get into some more substance and just dare to just jump into some deep water and just see where it goes if we're gonna, you know, get any further, I think. So yeah, I think that was the main ideas I had about this.
So anyone else is welcome to respond. I have two thoughts, but I'll let Alex go first.
Mine's thoughts are on the meta tags that appear in code in documents on the web. Whenever we're doing something online, like this Zoom meeting, for instance, we're creating data, and we're all involved in that process, all of us who turn up. If we have our own web page, each of us who turn up to these regular meetings, we're collaborating with a web document that has meta tags, a bit of code buried in the document that you don't see on screen, that links us all together for the AI brain, for the brain that is evolving to understand who we are, why we're here, and what we're doing, and when we're doing it. And that AI can count how many of us are getting involved and how many are not. So it knows who's doing shit and who's not doing shit. Just a matter of volunteering to do some shit, and we'll get along. We'll get more stuff done. As far as protocols go for meeting conduct, that's when rules are not necessarily accepted by a lot of people. Rules are, they rub up against a lot of people who don't like rules. So why not have, in place of rules, guidelines or traditions? AA has 12 traditions. They love that number 12 for some reason, but you don't need 12. You could have 6 or 8 or 4. As long as they're publicised well enough so that people who are turning up know them and are familiar with them, so they're in the familiarisation documents, the introduction, what do you call it? The new member initiation document. Okay, that's me over. Thank you.
I'm going to poke at that slightly, Alex. When you talk about everybody having a web page, do you mean that it has to be branded their own? Because out of every one of these meetings, there is a document, there is a Google Doc, and there is an invitation to co-create, collaborate, to edit, to revise, to append, to comment. And I see actually very little such activity. So if people can't actually comment on something that already exists, the level of effort required to even create your own with your own brand, to me, seems even larger. So I'm wondering whether or not, you know, there's some importance you attach to just having your own separate brand, or is it really the collaboration that you think is important?
Just a link. It's just a links document of your own. Your artwork, your picture, your background, your page. And it's just a links document that says, I'm a member of the collaboration and here's my links. And other people will put similar links on their pages.
So I think people do that. The people that want to do that are already doing it. So I'm just very curious about this.
Well, the thing is that the secret ingredient is to have a local people with the triad have a page. Then you know they're real people. If they're real people, we've overcome this problem on the internet of nodes arising that are not real people, but nodes arising that are bots and artificial intelligence bots that are not real people. They're taking all the cream off the cake, you know. Those bots are taking all the revenue streams from advertising sites and stuff like that. They're really corrupting the whole system. Alpha.
And in fact, that on Facebook is one of the reasons I dislike Facebook. But you know, there's other things about your proposal that I find troubling. And you make the proposal often enough that I think it's worth understanding, you know, whether it's working or whether it's not working.
I've got a neighbour one of my neighbours, he unloaded onto me at Christmas time. He's got a disability, but he's joined my local triad. And I'm just trying to encourage him with a little bit of counsel here and there to put up a web page document so that I can tell people, well, it does work, because I asked a real person to put up a page and they did. He joined the local GCC Far North Queensland Facebook page. So that's a start. Okay. All right. Jazz Winder's going to make one in the new year. And I think Stacey's got something planned. Over.
Okay. Hey, just to check, I have a couple of responses to what Glenn said earlier, but just wonder, you're back. Would you like to check your audio and see if it's back to a way we can actually understand you?
1, 2.
Much better. Much better. You can count to 2. That's excellent. All right. Before, when you were chipmunking, we couldn't figure out whether you could count or not. Okay. All right. Glenn, I would like to respond to you. Tees, you have something to say. You want to go first?
Yes, because you refer to a document where in all our names are, and I've worked on with that. So, but I don't see it regularly back. So it's a few months ago I saw it. So I might like to see it again. Maybe I can add some details, because then everybody can put in details. So you have the doc, but I don't know what it is. It's not easy to find.
So Tis, just as a habit, every one of the videos that's posted in GCC, as one of the first comments, I put a link to the Google Doc associated with that video. Every single one of them. And I've been doing this for 2 years plus.
Yep.
And I try, I mean, there's obviously a
not find-
few where I'm behind,
Yeah.
but,
But
I think that's a very consistent practice I'm trying to do.
Yeah, but I didn't find, so then the invitation to look at this document and add your personal details here, so we can find you and know what you're going to add to our team. So that's
Okay.
so the question is not there.
Interesting.
The link is there.
Because the link to the document is always right after the announcement of the video.
You know how to make a document, Tess? You know how to make a blog page or a web
No,
page?
no need to. I don't want to, so I don't feel a need. So it's okay. But
Carl
I know
Clerk-
you. I know you're stressing this. But once I know I have something to contribute, I will do this. But at the moment, I'm just scaffolding, listening. So it's not my habit to be on the front page.
Okay.
You don't have to. There's no
Alex.
I don't insist that people do it. I just say it's a matter of
Alex.
collaborating.
Yeah, it's an option.
He's already said he wasn't going
It's
to
an
do
option. It's an option. It's opt-in, isn't it? When you collaborate,
And Tis already said he wasn't going to do it.
he's opted out
Yes. Okay.
until later, until sometime in the future.
All right.
Yeah, you're in
All right. Can I
listening
get back
mode,
to my
let's
2
say.
points that I wanted to respond to Glenn? Okay. That is Glenn. Almost by intent, almost by design, these barn raising conversations have been meta communication. It's been communication about communication. Okay. There's too much other forum and activity for us to actually engage in issues that have to do with real world ideas like deforestation, poverty, all these other things. That's really not the intent under which this particular forum was initiated, okay? And I strongly support all of those other ones, okay? It's just that that's not my gift, where I can actually, make as big an impact in my own opinion, okay? So I was trying to figure out how can we understand those dynamics around communication so that the problems that appear, the leaning back, the triggering, the reactions, the back and forth, the escalation to violence, the passive aggressiveness, so we can understand how those can be sensed and then hopefully minimized so that we can actually stay more focused. So that's my first response to you. So this feeling of repetitiveness that I have heard you and Jaswinder and others talk about, okay, is because in my view, we still have multiple different perspectives on what is really happening. So I revisit to try and see whether we can get some more common perspective around that. And yes, it does sometimes feel like repetition, but I feel that sometimes I do it because we haven't gotten clear resolution on some of these conversations. In fact, almost never do we get clear conversation up until this very first brick. I think the very first brick is a very important step for barn raising, okay? And I would hope to say for GCC, but I'm not yet in a position to say that, okay? So that's point number one. The second point about rules being stifling is, I agree with that so much. That's why I really emphasize minimal structure, minimal scaffolding, because the more we actually come to these things prepared, open, curious, generous, listening, okay, then the fewer rules we need, right? The rules are necessary when people are all over the place with their personal habits and how they present themselves, okay? So that's why governments have to cover all cases. What happens if this person looks at me funny? What happens if I pull out a gun? All those cases. But if we're actually mature, collaborative human beings, I'm hoping that much of that comes from internal guidance and therefore doesn't have to be externally imposed. So I'm all about minimal when it comes to structure. I mean, just take a look at how many rules we've got, almost zero, right? We've only got one agreement so far after 3.5 years. So no, I am not a supporter of rules. However, I do know that some structure is necessary for the integrity of a thing. Without any structure, there's almost no integrity. And I've come to that conclusion after a long time. So I could explain that if you like. So anyway, that's my position on whether or not there's repetition and whether or not there's a likelihood of too many rules. Okay, just wondering.
I was going to save this till later. It's 16:34. We've had 34 minutes on Zoom already. It seems to me, this includes me as well, I'm one of the biggest protagonists, is that we can sometimes, some of us can be a little forceful in the delivery of what we have to say and the amount of time we consume saying what we want to say. The loudness can be a little overbearing as well. So I was considering over the last few days or so, perhaps we ought to add just one more rule which should calm everything down, our communications. And that is that if a person who repeatedly is a repeat offender of whatever it is that's annoying the majority, that the majority can then say via the moderator, invigilator, or whoever's in charge of the session, that if that individual continues that particular behavior, then we would have to issue a verbal warning, and that would be the very first verbal warning. And each verbal warning would escalate to via stages of that particular person working towards having their mic switched off by the moderator. And only the moderator is to, or the moderator and the host are to have control of the switch of the microphone. And let us assume that we could say in agreement that at the fourth stage, we switch off the microphone for 5 minutes, for argument's sake. At the fifth stage, 10 minutes. And thereafter, we can agree whether we're going to double or add 50% on for further breaches of the protocol on that session per session. So every session starts with a fresh account, unless there are repeat offendings on other as well consecutively, then the account would run consecutively. And I don't know how we're going to record that. We can talk about it. I'm sure Heiner has some superb systems thinking on that one. I'm complete for now. Thank you for your time.
And that's a typical example of something I'm not interested in spending my time on, right? Because I would be really happy if I could join a meeting like this where we just did not have to spend time on that kind of stuff, where we did not have to police each other. And
should be allowed to, Glenn, you should be allowed to interrupt though. Hey.
Yeah. And then if somebody gets out of line, the moderator can take responsibility. That's already happened. So why do we have to focus on that? Why can't we just try to just avoid that issue altogether? Because we're never going to solve it. If we go down that rabbit hole, you know this, Sam, come on. That rabbit hole is infinitely deep. It's the same thing as the other rabbit hole. If we go in an explorative direction, if we if we have that leaning in, that curiosity, just like you said, we don't need those rules because it's a different atmosphere in the whole room. And the issue that Jaswinder brought up probably won't even come up. And if it does come up, we'll deal with it there and then. But why do we have to spend so much energy focusing on those scenarios? Like, please.
Okay. I see Joel, I see Alex, I see Heiner, and then my hand is also up. So let's go Joel, Alex, Heiner, Sam.
Okay. Well, one of the reasons we need to stop people constantly interrupting is because of sentence structure and how people generally build up the picture before getting to their main point. If we're going to actually listen to them and understand their point and get that point, then we don't want someone to interrupt the person's thought before they've got to that point. Because if they're interrupting before that, then they don't know what the person's ultimately going to say. Those last 2-3 words in a sentence can completely alter its meaning. So that interjection is just a person wanting to get a point or win a battle. And that's not what the point of conversation is. We are trying to convey meanings to each other so we can understand perceptions. It's basically somebody's ego wanting to get in the way. Now, there is times when we do have to interject, but the way that person will interject will be different. I've had to interject over Colin, and I tell him why I'm doing that at the same time. And it's normally because he's just going around in a circle on points that we've heard him say many times, and he didn't hear the other person's meaning. So we do need to teach people that listening is important. It's not about the interjection itself, it's about how it's done, why it's done, and for us, so we can convey our meaning, it's to teach that lesson that you give people that little bit of respect. We have to teach people. That is the nature of existence. We are all in different positions and can recognize those positions. Every one of us probably can teach somebody else something if needed. So we should be given the respect of hearing that point and, you know, getting to the end of that point. Because I understand how frustrating it is when you know you haven't ultimately said what you wanted to say and someone interjects. There's an old saying, don't interrupt the master while he's talking. We all know what it's like when you talk. You get the flow, you've got the flow going, and then someone interjects and you can't get back to that flow. That's what that saying is all about. It's about the way our minds work and sustain flows of conversation and meaning. If you interrupt that flow, a lot of the time you lose it.
Alex, thank you, Joel.
With protocols, I've had people interrupt me when I've been going off on a tangent, and also when I've lost focus and just been rambling. And that's times when I've appreciated the interruption. But there are other times when I've been focused and talking about something specific and I get interrupted, that's a triggering event. So that's sort of one of the traditions that could be adopted. But if we have a network of people adopting protocols, then we need to be able to find each other. And if we haven't got our links on a page, that makes it much harder to find each other and to search the web with the information that brings up all these people with wonderful web pages that are collaborating on environmental issues and global governance issues. So as soon as you mention the word sovereignty of certain people in the room, it triggers them immediately. And they want to open a dozen rabbit holes. Over.
Okay, Heiner?
Yes, I was called in because my name somehow was in the room. I need to explain, and I'm very sorry that I didn't make it more clear before. I think our Western civilization is somehow in a time aberration. they're fighting for time and air time and quality time. But what I do with my magic round tables for 25 years is there is no rigid time. We take young girls, if we don't have women or whoever, who is not interested in talking, to be the mistress of time. She has the grace and the whatever pardon and firmament ceiling or whatever to grant time. So interruptions are welcomed, but the interruption time is given to the person who was interrupted. It is never taken as an assault. When there is someone speaking and he hasn't got speaking and attention and attraction and any time gifts anymore, then it is never oppositional. This young girl would never say, you don't have speaking time anymore, shut up, I mute you. No, she would look around in the group, and the group would look to the person who is speaking all the time and see, has he still some? And if he has still some time to talk, she will not interrupt him. And if the time is running out, she will sail and survey all the other eyes in the circle and ask, anyone would like to give him 2 more tokens, credits, minutes, because this person is running out of time. So it is never done confrontational. And time is not taken like rigid. For some person, a minute is 10 seconds, and another it's maybe 200 seconds. So it is all about harmony and jointly co-create something new. So it's never about digit and numbers. We in German have Novalis on really going beyond numbers and models and figures. Anyway, I have to go back.
Okay, so I believe it's my turn, and then we can see who else shows up. So Glenn, I have a very brief response to you. Hopefully it's brief. And that is, either we have some structure within the forum, or we have a gate before you can actually get into the forum, okay? And membership gates right now in GCC is completely open. In fact, there's only been a slight requirement to get in, and that's just that you have to answer these 3 questions that got created about 3 years ago, okay? And you have to not be a bot, and you have to be a real human person, okay? I think that's it. We don't require whether or not they're, believing in love or, anything like that, okay? However, what if that's the case, okay? But then the structure of the conversation, in some way, if we want focus, if we want, meaning to be co-created, we want to try and facilitate that, right? We want to try and optimize that because people are spending their valuable time and attention here for a reason. And if we have events and phenomena that detract from that, then to me, my request for agreements is about respecting that time, and it's about respecting that attention. And so let's say, if you catch me saying a single sentence 100 times over the next 2 weeks, it's probably a waste of your time that I'm doing so, right? So you want to give me some gentle guidance not to do so. That's what I'm actually trying to get, is to value our time here so much that we not allow violence, we not allow distraction, we not allow defocusing. That's really my interest in some of the structure. And a lot of people do this at the front door. Once you get in the door, you do whatever you want because they know you already. They know how you present yourself, okay? So there's that door there. If there's no door and anybody can come into this town square, and if somebody starts behaving in such a way that you actually find non-optimal. In a town square, you can walk someplace else and join a different conversation, right? So that's what these separate conversations have been. There's a Thursday, there's a Friday, there's a Saturday, there's a Sunday. They're all different conversations and different people congregate around those different areas of the town square. There's a reason, and everybody probably has a different reason. But for me, these questions have to do with respecting people's time, respecting our attention, respecting that we can try and have this opportunity to co-create. And that's what I'm trying to see whether we can make fertile. Over. Hey, welcome back, Ken.
So a little question to that, Sam. So if we're going to do that, should we practice those principles and not just theorize about them? Because it's like what you just said, I totally agree with it. What Alex said, what Joel said, I think is very sensible. It's just that has been said many, many times and sort of formulated in a theoretical way, more or less the same principles that we've been advocating. But where is the place to test those principles? Not theorize about them the way you do, when you're trying to create something theoretical, but is there an arena to practice those principles on some of the big social questions, such as, for example, what would be a sustainable, ecologically sustainable economy? What would be an economic model which would be really life affirming and would be sensible? And basically the big political questions, which in the political arena aren't being discussed at all because of the left and the right and the tribalism and that whole dynamic that we've also mentioned many times, that hinders any real conversation from actually beginning. I think we all have seen that. And then we've formulated in theory a lot of other principles, like the generative principles, rule omega, for example. It's a whole different way of thinking. It's basically you hear something and you're trying to look for the truth in what you hear and be able to build on it, right? But what I wanted to get to is that I feel like, we've been sort of doing that here, but we've been doing it very theoretically. We've sort of been doing model talk around it. But I would like to see some experiments. I would like us to test those principles on discuss some real tough questions and do it in a different way. Yeah.
Glenn, I appreciate that remark. That's why, let me go back to something I said a few times in the course of about 3 years. And that is, to me, there's about 6 different pillars on which I find this particular barn raising conversation really always standing on, okay? One is this activity of co-visioning, which you just mentioned. Well, in order to do that, there's another pillar, which is the co-sense making. In other words, we have to understand each other, okay? So there's about 4 others, and we've talked about these with surveys and others. But to me, I think this goes back to my first comment here, which is I want to sometimes spend a little bit of time on a human system side, sometimes spend a little bit of time on the tool system side, and each of these pillars requires, in my view, some time and attention. Okay, so for me, and I'm only speaking about barn raising, okay, is that when we do some of that mutual understanding, and when we do the co-visioning, when we talk about co-evolution of tools, those are opportunities to practice what it is that we are talking about. Also, whenever you go to other conversations, to me, it's very interesting to say, okay, what would happen if we were adopting these practices in this other forum? Suppose you said that to yourself in a Thursday or a Friday or a Sunday conversation, or suppose you did that conversation with somebody else, okay? these are all opportunities. So GCC is not a world in and of itself. It's a forum within the larger world that we live in. So what we talk about here, and I find this with all conversations, okay? All conversations impinge all other aspects of my life. So I try and find, relevance to those topics in whatever event or forum I'm in. So that's my response to your question. But anyway, welcome back, Kayla. I was wondering if we reconstructed the conversation well enough for you so that you can either follow or whether we need to recap some of this for Kayla. And I know Jazz has his hand up, so I don't know, Jazz, do you want to try and recap some of this for Kayla and also make your point?
I would just like to clarify all that's gone on in the last 24 minutes. It does not matter what the topic, the subject, whatever we want to bring on there. What matters is the filibustering, the constant of, well, I want to keep talking about this thing and I don't want to be interrupted and I want to keep on saying what I want to say. And that continuation. Now, I can understand Glenn defending against the rule that has been proposed. I would be defending it as well because I've said previously that I want interruption left in. It's 3 years now, and we've had some superb ideas and some superb conversations. It's time to move on. So if we all know who are the time wasters, we know their names, we know their tactics, and we know what happens. I mean, not just Sam, not just me, Doug, and others here. I won't name any other names. Tammy knew, and then we come down to one particular person. There's always one person. At the beginning, it probably would have seemed like I was that person, and I've changed my stance since then. To clarify in very short, succinct sentences, very quickly. Subject matter is up to the speaker. The discussion about that is to the other protagonists, as long as nobody hogs the whole session or large chunks of the session by using whatever tactics, even extremely polite tactics, to hog the whole session to bring on something we've all heard before, or it becomes a repeat session every time. We can agree on that. I mean, it's not difficult. After the session, we can get together and say, in the best of the jovial ways, look, Jas, can we call you Jas? Yeah. We found your behavior a little bit over the top in this session. And by we, we can all put people who think that way, put their hands up. And we think, you could modify that slightly in this way, and we'd all be much better. That's fine. And it should always be done through the moderator. As it escalates, and the people, it's kind of like the people in a committee meeting, and we talk through the chair, Mr. Chair or Mrs. Chair, Miss Chair. This is what I bring. And Miss Chair, I find so and such a person's behavior at this moment quite insulting, or whatever demeanor it's generating, and leave it at that, and the chair decides. And the chair can allocate or appoint other people to making a panel up and decide what to do. So there are various ways of doing this, but the clarity of it is we do not detract from anything. We always add. We allow repeat conversations as long as there is a update to it, not the same conversation over and over again without an update, an addition, or a change of information. I hope I'm clarifying things rather than just rabbiting on.
I just have one question. To me, it's not always obvious who are the time wasters. So I don't actually know who you think is a time waster, and I don't know who considers me a time waster. I have my own notion of who wastes time, but I don't think we have total agreement on all this. That's my first comment. Yeah,
We can
Jeff.
take a vote. I'm complete.
Did you say let's take a vote? Vote about what? Who the time wasters are?
Yep, put some names down on open up the poll and let's poll.
What about
I don't know if I want to focus on that.
what
I
about
do.
somebody's
If
not
I'm
here?
a time waster, I want to know how and why and where. Doesn't matter how, why. Let's find out who the time wasters are.
Okay, I'll just
think
make one
Kayla's a
meta
big
comment
time
about
waster.
this.
She never talks.
Okay, so I'll just make one meta comment about this. Somebody could go on for 8 minutes, and I think it's extremely valuable and it's not a waste of time. Somebody could make a 5-second retort, and I think that's just a waste of time.
Absolutely.
So there's very different standards we all have about
Absolutely.
what's a waste of time. Anyway,
That's why we need a judgment panel.
Kayla, you were asked to speak, and then Alex has his finger up. Do you have anything you want to add, Kayla? I was checking in with you. Okay.
Thank you, but no, not really.
Okay. Alex, you're on.
I was just going to say that people who are focused hate wasting time. They rarely get involved in something that they know is wasting time because they're focused. But people who aren't so focused don't believe that anything's a waste of time. They think it's all valuable. Even if somebody's rambling, that person's getting it out. So it's, in that sense, it's valuable. So that's a problem. That's why our traditions would say at this group, we avoid the situation because we have a tradition of avoiding it. But doesn't mean doesn't mean you can't go there if you don't want to. It doesn't mean you can't change your definition of what's wasting time if you think it's different to other people's definition. Over.
As long as the appointed committee members, or whatever you want to call it, the appointees, the invigilators, the moderators, the host, agree, it's not really a complaint. It's an observation that one finds that a certain behavior is not conducive to the GCC
ethos.
No, this particular session, what are we calling this? Foundation laying, FL. So each session has a moderator, and each session the moderator may appoint or we appoint together, whatever the decision-making system is. Once it's in place, we have people that could be put on the waiting benches, if you like. So if one doesn't turn up, then that place is filled for that session, etc. The machinations aren't that difficult. It just needs to be started. It just needs the moderator to start it. And in this case, the moderator on this session is always Sam. If Sam wants to appoint a host at the same time, now he did appoint me host, but because I've restarted, I've lost that position. And that should have automatically gone to somebody else because I restarted or put back in. Either way, these things, the machinations can be tickled to work as they should. I think Kayla has something to say, so I'll give way. All yours, Kayla.
Heiner has his hand up. I'm seeing Kayla kind of gently shake her head.
Well, it looks like Jasvinder is the moderator. No, I feel you did not listen to me. I feel we should learn to do without moderator. I gave you the example where a young girl without any idea to moderate makes sure there is harmony and there is singing and swinging. And what you, Jaswinder, is putting forward is the old thing of one is having the hat on and he's speaking. I was trying to give you the idea, it is a floating idea. And for this young little girl, when this person is something very, very interesting, then seconds can be minutes. And if the whole group is there, who cares about time dilution? It is all about serendipity and synchronicity and rhythm. And I feel, Jaswinder, not at all understood. Maybe we talk in one-on-one one day. I feel it is very important to go beyond the grit and strong old thinking of I have the time and I control and I say who is next and who is the moderator. I hope we can come in the next year or the next decades to more like a flow, uh, how do you say, serendipity, groove experiments in conversations.
Heiner, thank you very much for your input. I'm not disputing anything you say. I totally agree. This rule does not even have to go into effect at all. It's just there if you want it. If you don't want it, reject it. Take a vote on it. Don't take a vote on it. Go another 6 months without changing anything. But sometime or other, we have to have a structure in place that everybody understands. Did you wave at me, Kayla? Okay, so a structure that everybody understands, a structure we have been using previously, and we can use it and get rid of it as soon as everybody behaves as required, as we should. Complete.
I want to draw attention to a comment Joel just made in the note as well. So Heiner, I do have a response to you, but I want to make sure that the other people have a chance to speak. Anybody else itching to speak? Kayla.
I'll speak. Usually when I invite other people to the group, I always give them the premise that, you know, we do have a very loose moderator, which honestly is, in my opinion, it's fine. You know, gives people the ability to talk when they do. And then I also just feel that there's a structure, but not really a structure, if that makes any sense. You know, I do feel that this group in particular, you know, does give each other the courtesy to talk when they want to, or say what's needed to say. And I would have to disagree with Jaswinder in the sense that, well, I would have to agree and disagree both, unfortunately, because when a person rambles, sometimes there's a little bit of information that can be caught from that may turn out to be a good thing. Is this the forum for people to just ramble and let their feelings talk? Maybe, maybe not. And I'll give you an example that just happened. I just got off the phone with my ex-husband, and I thought, holy crap, this is gonna suck. I'm gonna have to sit there and listen to him. But out of that conversation, we actually came to a really good agreement. And sometimes that happens in this forum. But I do agree to some degree that there are people who do waste a little bit of time. but I'm not quite sure how one would moderate that, to be honest. I'm complete.
Thanks, Kayla. Anyone else before I go? Alex?
Oh,
Glenn?
I got one question. What would be great use of time in this context? Just a question to the room.
What would be that question?
May I take that
What would be,
question?
yeah, well, like we've spoken a lot about
May I take
things
that
to
question?
avoid.
The
Well,
objection
Alex and I were
Yeah.
next in line, if that's
Okay.
okay.
Glenn used the word there. I didn't catch it.
Yeah, the question was what would be great use of time in this context?
Okay.
What would be a success, let's say? That's the
There's a
question.
there's a situation where some members bounce out, new members especially, because they're not used to a group that's so open and so flexible that allows these events to rub against each other and cause conflict. But part of the process of doing us better is discovering how we get over these conflicts and resolve them. It's part of our focusing on dispute resolution. So in that sense, if the newcomer is explained, if it's explained to the newcomer that you will encounter these things in this group, but it's part of the process of growth and emergence, then they will be more likely to persevere with it, hopefully. Anyway, that's it. Over.
Okay, I believe it's my turn and then Jazz. Alex, I want to thank you because you actually do understand that without some structure, conflicts or discomfort or disagreement is inevitable. In fact, even with structure, that's inevitable. But particularly without structure, then it's almost invited, okay? And the experience of it, when it happens, is an opportunity to learn and figure out, okay, so what might be a good way to show up to this? What might be those internal structures that allow me to behave as I would want to behave? The best Sam I could present to the world, okay? On the other hand, if I'm here just saying, oh, shut up, shut up, shut up, you're talking too much, you're blah, 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 blah. If I'm just here doing that as a child, okay? Now, what would be the best structure for the group to guide me and gently say, hey, grow the bleep up, okay? So the fact we don't have a lot of structure invites us to lean in, because if those conflicts, if passive aggressiveness, if reaction, if triggers, all that makes you uncomfortable, you're going to bounce out. If you don't understand that these are opportunities to say, okay, how could we have done that differently? What structure internally would have helped? What structure intra or interpersonally, both areas, could have helped? And then we'll put that brick in place. And through having more of these conversations, we'll put another brick in place. And hopefully after some time, we minimize the violence. I don't think we'll ever completely get rid of it, but we'll minimize, and we'll probably allow more focusing, more sense making, and less distraction, less violence, less ad hominem, all of that undesirable stuff. That's why we're having these meta conversations. So I appreciate you putting that the way you did, Alex. It was allowing me to amp on it, vamp on it, and really make this point. Thanks. Over. And then now it's Jazz.
Yeah, to go back to Glenn's question, as I've iterated before, Glenn, anything you want to talk about without let or hindrance, anything, okay? You come along, whether you want to come and tell us what you'd want to talk about, or whether it arises in the moment and you say, whoa, I've just had a light bulb moment. I want half an hour. Give me half an hour. If everybody agrees or whatever, you've got the half hour and probably more time, as Heiner said. If you need more time, you can have more time. We are flexible. But if I come along and say, you can't have half an hour, I got things to say, and I keep interrupting you time and time again. And other people say, Jazz, calm down, let him finish. If you keep interrupting him, it's going to take longer. Then you won't get any time at all. And Kayla says, kick him out. That is not allowable anymore. Then the moderator has to step in and say, break, time out. If you
Yeah,
guys
we'll cover that. We've covered that. So,
moderator.
so what you're saying then is that success would be each of us talking about what we really want to talk about. Is that what you're saying?
If you have turned up here, you have turned up with some sort of an expectation to talk about something that's already ongoing. But if you have something completely different, or you have additions to make what's ongoing and you need more time, there's nothing wrong with asking for that time, or even getting it without asking. As long as you don't come in here and you start talking about the word secular for 3 consecutive meetings in 4 different sections for 5 different weeks. Thank you.
Or if we just keep on repeating the same things we've said before, which most agree with, can also be a hindrance for us to talk about what we really would like to go into.
Exactly.
And that was what I was getting to at the start. Because if we're going around the meta level discussion and trying to figure this out in theory, then my experience has been that that takes up so much space that there isn't space for the really burning questions and the deep insights and the explorations. I think a great example was that conversation where you and Colin had this thing going. The secular came up, yeah. But the point I'm getting to is you didn't even go into the question of the origin of this, which is what I'm interested in. When will we go into a discussion where we try to figure out what is actually going on, instead of talking about how we should talk about something when we later on get down to, you know what I'm saying? Yeah, Sam has something. I can see
Okay,
it.
so at the risk of sounding repetitive, this is why I wanted to have some focus across each of those 6, what I call pillars of boundary. So sometimes we have conversations like this. Sometimes we have conversations about mutual understanding. Sometimes we go into a particular case study, as we did last week. And sometimes we go into co-visioning, okay? And those, as I keep saying, are opportunities for us to practice these meta communication kind of points. So as a change of pace, how would you like to, and I'm just asking for feedback here, shift a bit? Because I notice that you're, in a sense, tuning out. That's what I feel anyway, regarding these kinds of conversations. But I would like to sort of say, how about if we shift to one of these other pillars? How about if we spend the last 45 minutes, or whatever is left here, 44 minutes, okay? And perhaps pick one. Maybe it's co-visioning again. Maybe it's actually imagining that future. Maybe it's imagining what interpersonal interaction would feel like if we were like human being 2.0, whatever your favorite term for that would be. Okay, imagine the world you want to live in. This is just a suggestion, by the way. And how we feel, how we interact with each other, and what would the world look like, and more importantly, what's the first 1 or 2 or 3 steps we need to take to get there? That would be, for me, one way to invite a co-visioning conversation. Over.
I just have a very quick retort to that. Baby steps, and don't get upset. Don't take things personally.
Are you calling me a baby?
Open. Okay, toddler steps. Be open.
Are you calling me a toddler?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just say I would love to go into just what you described there, Sam.
Okay, let's practice
That's exactly what I would like to
My
do.
suggestion, RFC, Glenn, you have the floor. Moderate the next 45 minutes. I'll sit back and be a participant. Let's do this experiment.
Okay, well, then I'll just go ask that question that you asked. Imagine the world you want to live in. What kind of world is it? What is a normal day like? What is the interpersonal relationships like? And I can begin just so maybe, yeah, go for it first, Jaswinder.
Yeah, in my world, every village has a village idiot. And I would like to ask the panel how they would treat the village idiot. How would they try and get along with him to improve the village idiot? I'm complete.
I would want to have a world where the village idiot was someone who could bring in something new, and where we respect the weird people for the potential in what they're saying, and with the potential of their strange ideas maybe being mixed with some of the more traditional ideas, so that we can consider the village idiot, let's say, as, you know, a gift. So it's this idea of the shaman, the person who is between two worlds. The village idiot could be that person who brings out in something new. And if the community receives it, then that person, the strange people, can really flourish. And but it requires that the community receives it as a gift. As a gift, maybe that one can build on. It's not necessarily ready made, but it's something new. It's something interesting. Yeah. Go ahead, Sam.
Actually, Joel had his hand up before me.
Yeah. Go for it, Joel.
Okay, well, you've asked people to imagine a world that they want to create. But do people understand the interactions of the world? The interactions of how everything works? Because an imagined possibility without that knowledge isn't really a possibility in most circumstances. People seem to think that just because you imagine it, it is possible. But the simple fact is, chemistry and everything works the way it does. Emotions and all those things work the way they do. So we come back to existence works the way it does. That's not our choice. And until we recognize the nature and interactions of everything, any world we try to create out of emotion or any other type of ideas that doesn't really relate to true interactions of existence, we're just going to keep making mistakes. One of the things we learn as we grow up is that our emotions aren't as true as we think. We do this going through childhood and then teenagers, as we go through a myriad of emotional reactions, and then learn in adulthood that those reactions possibly made the situations worse. And it was our inability to recognize our position that caused us to create yet a further problem on the problem we already had. We need to learn how to interact with each other as different dimensional beings. If you look into nature, you will see the dark side of nature. If you look into nature, you will see the lighter side of nature. Both of these parts have their life form range that do actions and behaviors that collectively, whilst we as humans might find them emotionally distressing, actually maintains the entire system. We learned when we introduced wolves back into Yellowstone that the wolves were vitally necessary to the ecosystem, as they maintained the deer from being in certain locations, kept their populations at the right numbers for the ecology. And as they did that, the entire ecosystem of Yellowstone changed and readapted back to its more natural working ways, the ways before humans took too much control and removed a part of the functioning system. We need to pay attention to that before any frilly ideas of what can be. Because if we don't sustain the bottom end of nature with trying to create a nicer life for ourselves, all we do is destroy the thing that sustains us. We need to understand the true interactions of nature, not what we want to force it to be. We need to work with it and understand it. And only through doing that will we be able to create a type of harmony. But it's not a harmony that most people would think. It's never going to be that, because it can't be. The interactions need the interactions. One side of the spectrum needs the other, simply to exist. Whilst many don't like the other side, we've all been made stronger by them, and their negative interactions have given us positives. We need to learn to love everything for what it is. We need to see how things that we thought in the moment was bad ended up being a good for us. I was speaking to Kayla the other day, and she spoke of a negative interaction. And then I pointed out the positive lessons she'd learned from that. Sometimes it just takes readjusting your perspective of certain things. And that's all abstract in the mind. Are we trying to get to a world where there's many worlds, or are we trying to understand that this world is what it is? Isn't that the point of what science attempts to achieve? But the West wants to force its ideological perspective of everything onto that science as well, not understanding that things that Westerners consider bad would be considered good by a completely different type of, with a completely different way of looking at existence and a different way of emoting. This
Yeah,
is what
thanks. Yeah.
it's with religion.
Yeah, thanks. There's a couple of hands up here, but I think
Yep.
I just want to mention that point there relates to the conversation we've had about truth and about if we're going to imagine a better world, and maybe the foundation for that is like really good understanding of base reality, that as it is, like the foundational laws that aren't based on opinion. So yeah, Sam and Alex. Sam is first.
I want to make 2 points. Again, Joel, I'm amping on what you're saying today quite a bit, because I think this comes about in much confusion when we try and substitute the word truth for experience. When we talk about my truth, when people really mean my experience, but their wording is my truth. And that begins to then throw some confusion into this notion of truth, which I think is a disservice to the rest of us all. And the way I would like to emphasize that is because there's this old saying, which I really, really like, okay? It goes something like this. I'm going to paraphrase, okay? Something like, don't make decisions or don't take actions when you're angry, and don't make promises when you're happy, right? Emotions are going to take you out of a more sustainable, a more, thorough, more comprehensive mode, which I would call flow, by the way. Do these things in flow. Make decisions, take actions, make promises when you're in flow. But when you're triggered one way or the other, when you're super happy because, something just happened, or you're super sad or mad, when something else just happened, those are the wrong times to make life-altering changes, okay? Hell, they're the wrong time to even make day-altering changes. So I think these emotions can give us signals which are useful, but for us to act immediately on them typically goes awry. Over. Thank you.
Alex. Go for it.
Sam just said something that triggered a response mechanism. When people with varying different different belief systems come together, and they're accepted in the group as having a right to believe what they have chosen as their spiritual uplifting belief system. You know, we've got a world full of Hindus, Muslims, Buddhists, Catholics, agnostics and secularists, but we all get together in a group and respect each other's right to have that faith or that following or that path in life, whatever path it may be. That's your path. Knowing that and respecting it without denigrating and somebody else is important, I think, because it's something people don't like when they see somebody else pointing their finger and saying, "Oh, you're a bloody Hindu, or you're a bloody religious Catholic, or a Roman, or a evangelist mad had a flat earther. So what are you doing here?" But those people, you know, no matter how crazy their belief system is, it's their belief system, and they have the right to maintain that until somebody changes their mind. So this isn't the place to preach to other people about their faith, what their faith should be or shouldn't be. This is a place to accept them and follow your own path, you know, doing the road less traveled, like that book by M. Scott Peck. He was a brilliant man. But there's many others on the internet. So I'll leave it at that. Over.
Thanks. Reminds me of the value of humility in the face of truth, which, as far as I can understand, in all the great religious and spiritual traditions, as well as in all of science, this principle of humility is very central, of being open for something unknown. So let's say you have a belief system, you express certain beliefs. Am I open for the fact that maybe you understand something that I don't understand? Maybe you mean it in a different way than how it seems from my point of view. Then it would seem that with that attitude being practiced, we escape that cycle of putting others down for their beliefs. Because since we mentioned truth, in truth, for the most part, we don't actually understand those other people's beliefs. Maybe they don't even understand it themselves, or it's a dynamic understanding, it's a limited, but certainly I don't. So I want to add that to the list of the kind of world I would want to live in. It's a kind of world where this attitude of humility is very, very basic, and it sort of removes a lot of the obstacles of judgment. Yeah, what are you thinking, Jesslinger?
There is no list, there is no limit. The subject matter, the topics are wide open. Atheist, agnostic, scientific, agricultural, you know, whatever is in the syllabuses of the universities, curriculums of the world, they're all open to discussion. Coercion and even the slightest force of trying to change somebody's belief is not acceptable. Talking about it, explaining what it means, comparing it to others without degradation, without denigration, humbly, if possible, those are the compassionate ways of talking. Not come around and say, I'm an atheist and I don't have to prove anything, because it's a zero-sum equation. So whatever you say You have to prove to me. Even if I had the answer, would I give it to somebody with that attitude? No, I'm complete.
So do we have any other things?
We're
Go,
creating
go
a
for
barn.
it, Alex.
We're creating a barn that is a universal housing project for the entire world and all its religions and cultures. That's an interesting fact. Over.
Yeah, I think Sam has something just before I wanted to, one thing that I had in mind, your idea of web pages. Let's say each person had their own page or their own profile or their own, how can I put it? Their own information repository, right?
Blog.
Blog, but more like they have their own information repository, which is dynamic, and some part of it is private, but some part of it is like the face outwards. And let's say you also have a dynamic conversation space where we share our best insights and we refine our insights so that those different pages reflect also a dynamic development in the understanding of each person. And let's say that we could have a sort of peer-to-peer structure where we weren't dependent on the algorithms like social media, which tends to, emphasize a lot of negative things, but where the basic structure of it sort of moves us towards continuously focusing our attention on what we really believe to be true insights in correspondence with objective reality, what Joel pointed to and Sans pointed to, and also what are our greatest wishes for the future. So let's say we could imagine a global information system which was dynamic and which was nurtured through these conversations, and where new literature and new art and new philosophy and new science and new spiritual practices all would flower from this continuous interaction between people around the world, meeting like this in different ways, having that attitude of wonder, having that humility, having that basic respect, therefore not needing all the rules. And then gradually this understanding grows, and it grows in a lot of different people. And it's not just an intellectual understanding, it's a growth of a new, more mature being that we all move towards. And in that context, I can see what Alex is talking about, that very simple structure, each person having their own page, and they can link to the other pages. And that sort of a structure, a dynamic knowledge repository of the people, a sort of intelligence network of the commons, that is a part of the world I want to live in, where that is really central and where that feeds us with new insight. It feeds us closer to reality, closer to discernment, to seeing the difference between just the subjective shifting things and certain objective laws which remain permanent. So yeah, I wanted to add that. And what do you think, Sam?
I did not have my hand up.
I think you had it a little earlier, but okay, maybe.
We have an opportunity to feed the AI. We have an opportunity to supply data to the AI, good data. Over.
Exactly. And then the AI is that totality of understanding. which is the result of all the people, all the machines, all the documents, all the exchanges, all the questions, all the works of art and the thoughts and the ideas formulated. Yeah, that fits into this. Go for it, Sam.
Okay, now I have something to say. Okay, I hear this AI be mentioned so often. I have to say something here. Okay, what's being done right now is a lot of data mining, and it's a lot of statistical methods to pick out trends about each of us. But it's not in the pursuit of truth, or it's not in the interest of putting us in connection with others who think like that. It's in pursuit of monetization, of optimizing advertising dollars, of optimizing or maximizing rather engagement time. So until we have a society where we, the people, can employ just as powerful methods as Facebook, as Apple, as Google, as Microsoft, as any of these big guys, okay? Then I would urge you to stop talking about AI because it's not for our human purposes and interests, okay? So for me, all this stuff about technology is driven by the people behind them. So as long as you have money, as long as you have people with intents and objectives, which are, let's say, more profit driven and less humanitarian and sustainability and resilience and thrivability driven, the AI is actually not doing what you want it to do for the betterment of humanity. How many times do I go onto Facebook, for example, and I'm ranting about Facebook, and not see some of my friends show up and know, hey, it's been days or weeks since I've seen from this friend, and I go to that person's timeline, there's been some activity there, but Facebook is filtering it out. They're not showing me everything my friends are doing. They're only showing me what they want me to see and engage with. So the AI that's going to take your web page and your tags and everything else, that's not going to work on your behalf, Alex. I'm sorry to say. That's my position anyway. Over.
But is that inevitable, Sam? Aren't we sort
No,
of trying
it's not
to?
inevitable always.
Yeah.
But today, with the people pulling the money and say they want, another 0.03 cents per minute out of you versus, some other thing, right now, it's the way it is.
Okay, that
If you haven't
I get
seen,
that.
by the way, if you haven't seen, what is that movie, Social Dilemma? You really have to go see it. If anybody here has not seen it and you spend time on Facebook, you need to go see Social Dilemma.
I haven't seen it, but I know exactly what you mean. But what I wanted to say is, aren't we here trying to reimagine a different kind of AI? Isn't that sort of the whole point? Where we will.
But Alex is recommending action now.
You
right?
don't need
He's recommending
Facebook.
putting a web page now.
Well, I think that's one part of it, right?
I'm saying we don't need Facebook. We don't need any platform because we've got the internet up there already.
Yeah, so what would this technology be if it was in the service of truth, in the service of humanity, in the service of a good life for all of us? How would we then use these systems?
It's a network linked together with HTML pages.
Okay, but it's also much more than
We already
that.
have that, Alex.
We already have that,
well,
but there's much more.
It's not convincing politicians to develop a mine if they can go on the internet and find out how many people oppose mines or how many people are working on reforestation. When they know that, they can think, there's an election coming up, I better change my policy. But if they can't see that, if they can't see that metric,
okay, I'm interrupting now. Sorry.
When they can't see that metric, they're in the blind. They're working for the corporations who are putting bots up there to convince them something else is reality. So when we get involved with our own pages, we're moving this needle. We're moving the needle on the compass to point in a different direction. Over.
Yeah, but again, as we've talked about before, what you're mentioning there seems to be dependent on there also being this generative movement
Yeah, that's
of
like an
certain
avalanche.
people who use these tools in a completely new way with completely different principles. And I think that's sort of what all of these conversations circle around, right?
Principle number one is that the two people I add to my triad are real people that I know.
Yeah. And when you say that you know, that sort of also implies that there's some mutual understanding. Sam had something, and Jess Winger
face to
also.
face, people I met face to face in my community. They if I ask them to go online and make a page.
I think we understand that. I think we understand that, Alex. Yeah.
Show them the examples.
Yeah. Okay, Sam first, and then Jess Winger.
Actually, so I will admit to being triggered. Okay, Alex, you bring up this web page, this AI thing so much that I'm really looking for an example of where what you say is succeeding. If not, I suggest looking at reasons for why it's not. And for things to be explosive or combinatorial or, anyway, for that to happen, this repetition, this copying, this by 2, by 3, by whatever, has to happen in predictable time periods. And if it's happening, show it to me. But if it's not happening, really look at why it's not happening. And a lot of what you're saying right now, I'm trying to be very pointed about the fact that this AI is not doing what you want it to do. The web pages are not doing what they want you to do. Even people here within the group have expressed the lack of desire to create web pages. I've been creating lots of web pages, okay? So I think there's something yet incomplete about your model, Alex, and yet I'm not hearing new elements of it every time I hear it. So for me, and I'm saying this is triggering, this is becoming repetitive for me. Over.
But there's a point about the URL that has this community of impact or COI in it, which creates
I
a
think
link.
it was my turn, Alex. Please.
Yeah, go for it, Jess Winger. Yeah.
Thank you. Heine's waiting as well. I concur with Sam about Alex, and I think this is a prime example of the kind of behavior which becomes triggering because the participant, in this case, Alex, wants to keep repeating the same information over and over again. And by the time I've done this little chat, I've forgotten the light bulb moment I had from the previous speakers. It does, we all have limited amounts of memory, and it takes it away from that. Let me just have a look at the chat to see if it comes up again. Oh yeah, I put a link in the chat of a torrent website to download a most excellent series called House, and it covers a myriad of subjects and topics in the English language produced by Hollywood studios. It's well worth watching. It brings forth the current dialogue that the millennium generation are using, and maybe it will help us to gel some more. And I'm extremely, extremely glad and happy with the way Glenn has conducted the meeting so far. And I'm giving way because that's all I have to say. Thank you for your consideration.
Okay, I think
Alex,
Heiner's
you're
got
not
something.
somebody.
Yeah, Alex a little later, but let's go for it, Heiner.
Joel was next. Is next
And,
in the chat.
Heiner,
okay.
were you before me, Heiner?
One of you first.
No, I'm just the observer, the silent observer. And I observed Joel very kindly was trying to input, but he has this decency and he never got the space or the voice. Glenn,
Now you have it, Joel.
Glenn, when you are speaking, you cannot look who else wants to make silent, very interesting inputs. So I feel we are still in this old rot. I don't have anything to say, but maybe Joel wanted.
Yeah, Joel, the floor is yours.
You said it earlier, Glenn. You were saying that there used to be people we listened to, the shamans, the mystics, the people who demonstrated such substantial intellectual ability. They saw the world in a completely different way to everybody else. Western cultures have demonized these people as not being normal. Yet when we look at the mathematical and scientific understanding of what normal is, it's literally saying, be the lower end of human ability. Don't be outside of that. Ooh, when are people going to start recognizing the people who are bringing this to the table? You all keep saying we've got to pay attention to these people and then go back to the idea that everybody gets a choice. We've all accepted that the outside world we live in has rules and functioning natures, yet everybody gets a choice. We know the normal people of our populations don't know reality in the existential scientific sense. They know enough reality to live their normal lives within what our cultures create, but they don't know the vast existential interactions. They can't conceptualize them and see them as geometries. There are people who are trying to get their voices out to everybody, but even in amongst groups of highly intellectual people, rather than recognizing this person is among them, they let their own egos get in the way and want to push their own ideas again. We all know that science doesn't know everything about how things work. In fact, we know that those who have taken the time to look at the ancient cultures and their highest of society, we quickly find that even though their abstractions were different, they were actually trying to describe the same things, whether they saw them as gods, bodhisattvas, angels. These words are meaningless in reality. They are trying to point to something either experienced or dimensional. They're trying to describe something functional. How many religions came up with gods of love because they knew something was happening inside them that they didn't have much control over, and so they called it a god. When do we recognize those people are there? That tiny 0.0000001% of the population have such drastic understanding of the nature of existence that we don't truly want to hear it, because it tells us things about our own natures many of us don't want to accept.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that in. And so the question then is, so what would be a dynamic that would accommodate the ability to receive that understanding? Because one thing that you've mentioned before, and I've noticed it's a very big theme, is this tendency to be hypnotized by abstractions, this tendency of the human mind to get sort of stuck in concepts and get stuck in ideological constructs and being attached to those constructs. As far as I can tell, that seems to be one of the main obstacles that prevent, maybe especially prevent, the intellectuals from understanding this. Maybe it's harder for the intellectuals than for most people. Yeah, what are you thinking, Joe?
May I just come back on that very short one?
Go for
As
it.
an example yet to bring to what you said. I read an article from an Australian newspaper. Their farmers were having problem with locust. The crops they were trying to protect had less value than the locust they were killing. The nutritional value of locust in that number is vast, yet they were trying to poison and kill the locust rather than eat them to try and save the crop, which they thought was more valuable. that is an abstracted ideology of what has value and what doesn't. The Chinese eat locust, and as far as I'm aware, their nutritional value and what they bring for their size is quite great. We've had this in history before, cultures demonizing locust and not seeing the potential of them as being food. Could have saved them, yet they destroyed it out of ignorance.
Yeah, Alex.
That's one of the things that is a common concern among millions of people. I think over 80% of the world's population want a world free of war. They want a denuclearized world that's safer to live in. Over 80%, probably over 90%. But what gives us a volume in our voice is having a network connecting us all together. People who, only the special people who are concerned about the issues, if their voice is not heard, it's because they haven't got those linked network pages that the AI bots that the corporations use are counting. And the politicians are in there counting them too, because they're the people who make policies and rely on votes. In most countries where democracy is still working properly, and it can be improved. We can improve on something that's working, and we know some things are not working because corporations want resources, but the science is telling us that some resource depletion is bad for the planet, and microplastics bad for the ocean. Over.
Yeah, go, Jaswinder.
If I may, thank you, Alex. That's a most excellently valid point. This is something that somebody else has mentioned about the nature of things and how they work or operate or are in engagement, and corporations, governments, and other systems of governance, either private or publicly paid for. I would tend to say that the majority of us and the majority of people have no idea of how they operate, have very little idea of the interaction in between, and how the said people here, in this case, the corporations, manipulate governments and other sectors of industry to further their own interests. And this obviously includes corporations such as the Facebook, Twitter, and other multimedia. And that fellow from cable TV, Murdoch, the forefront runner who's trying to be one of the global dominators at the moment. Unless we mention these things, and unless we take it upon ourselves to devote some time to research and talk about what we know and put it forward so that everybody is up to speed and they keep themselves up to speed as to how these operators operate. It's a bit like the elephant and the 20 people, isn't it? Blind, we're all blind. So we are just conversing at a very low level. And it is my desire, heartfelt, to go to the deeper levels where we can do targeting. Each of us today can interfere in the ways of targeting some senator, some MP, or somewhere, and say, I don't know how this is operating. What can you do to change it for the betterment of all society? Locally, think locally, act globally. I'm complete.
That's great, and that continues to add to this general picture that's been portrayed of let's call it the old system or the existing paradigm. I mean, it does seem to me though that this system of exploitation that's often mentioned with, you know, banks and certain corporate entities that have other corporate entities working for them, etc. There seems to be a certain kind of a system that continuously transfers more money to accounts that are already very big. Seems to me that that is connected to this issue that we've also talked about minds being, I would call it, hypnotized by abstractions, and sort of this belief that money is something, you know, concrete, rather than that we could create money out of thin air, which, as far as I can tell, is pretty obvious that we can. I mean, and that's what happens. That's what money is, essentially. It's completely abstract. It's and the value of money always comes down to real resources or real goods or services or events in the space of events that are valuable. So that's where we can see a connection there. And that again leads me to, and then just when you mentioned just this fact that people misunderstand and speak past one another, etc. And it's a low resolution communication. We've gone through all that. Then let's look at this idea. Sam had this idea, global sim. Others have had this too. What if we could have a picture language that could visually represent the distribution of resources to different people in different specific situations, in different local circumstances? This again also ties to Alex's idea. Yeah, I see you, Jess Winder, but I think this is important because we're collecting a lot of the ideas here. And so the world that we would want, it does seem clear. It would have to be a world where our thinking is more clear than going through all these abstract ideological constructs that create endless loops of confusion, and where we can find a shortcut so we can actually communicate ideas very specifically about distribution of resources, about quality of life, about health, about something that ties directly in with the space of events itself. So I just wanted to throw that out as, you know, what might be a bridge beyond this clearly malfunctioning system we described to a more humane system where we feel at one with nature. And yeah, okay. I think Sam has his hand up and Jess Winder. I think Sam was first, so go for it.
Okay, so the point I'm trying to make is we've had an experiment here for the last 45 minutes. Glenn has actually moderated. We've actually attempted to focus around this co-visioning theme. I'm just curious, since it's top of the hour or just past it, whether there's any lessons we've learned about how we applied any of our agreements or how that first brick worked, or whether there were any other additional bricks that we might want to take out of the kiln or oven. So I was just curious whether there was that, whether now or whether at the end, but I just wanted to point it out. It's at the top of the hour. And so that's for consideration. Over.
It took us,
both Alex and Joel.
I'm just saying it took us 3 years to get the brick, and I brought along a brick to add to it, but you don't want that brick in the kiln because it's about getting us all to create our own page.
I want it. I want it.
With a special URL that the AI can read and understand and knows we're all linked somehow. When it reads the pages and finds those links, then it knows why we're linked. and the politicians will get the message, and it'll change the world.
I'd like to bring something completely different mentioned by our current experimental moderator, something everybody uses every day and wish they had more of: money. Now, from what Glenn had to say about money, it came to my understanding and attention that he knows very little of the monetary systems around the world, the currency systems and the exchange mechanisms, etc. And I think somebody or somewhere, or we all jumping together. And one other, it's not a criticism, you understand, it's just an observation. I do like Glenn, and I like his ability to moderate, probably a lot better than I ever did or do. But he was collating all the information, which is great, but a lot of that collation is repetitive. It's adding to, definitely, but it's adding and repeating. And that obviously takes twice as long to get through. And the other one is the last item is Alex and his fixation on talking about his agenda at every given opportunity, at every given time. And this is a strong observation. When anybody stops speaking, Alex is in there with a retort or a remark or something, and it really does upset other people's memories. You know, they're holding their light bulb and you dim it. I'm complete.
I think Joel had something, or did you? Okay. Well, yeah, I know there was some repetition there, but I was also asking a question about the global sim. What would be a different language? I think that's an area that hasn't been very well explored, or let's say a different way of thinking. You're pointing to this.
If I may interject here, I put a link into chat 2 times. I'll do it again the 3rd time. This is as far as I can ascertain, and I have other people who have ascertained the same, a program that's running, or it's finished running, series 1. There may be a series 2. It's called House MD, and I put a link into chat as to where it can be downloaded for free and watched at your leisure. It's a superb series, hilariously funny, and it has some real deep thinking in it, down to the death level and the ecstasy level. Please download it and watch it. And if you don't know how to download it, ping me and I will explain. It's free. There's nobody going to come knocking your door or anything. All you need is a PC that's working, and you know how to use, well, we all do. So yes, language is on the agenda as well, as it always has been. Glenn, thank you very much for bringing it up. And this will obviously give us a mutual language with mutual understanding that is current. And it's a world dominant language. Okay, so we've got money, language that we can tackle immediately. Thank you.
Are you pointing to the language of moving pictures, since you mentioned this series?
When I use the word language, Glenn, I know we're out of time now, so I'll elaborate on this. When you talk, when you move your head, when you dip your head down like now, all that is language. The way you're sitting, okay? The way you fold your hands together, everything you do, I am recording in here, and it may be good or bad or whatever, and I, being a master manipulator, will use it to manipulate you as I am now. So that is a valid point. What do you mean by language? Anything that conveys any information that causes a reaction or a change, or in any way, shape, or form brings attention anywhere, is language. You can ask a baby if she'll tell you, or you can observe, and that will definitely tell you. So yes, language is a major thing, and this series, House MD, will show you how to use that, because Mr. House himself explains it in almost every episode, and it repeats and repeats till it sinks into our tiny little gray matter, 3 cells, and the fourth one is obviously the white matter. And I don't know about the fifth one. I couldn't find him. I'm complete.
Well, thanks. Definitely gonna check that out. Alex, what are you thinking?
I'm thinking about the time language takes to evolve. A specialized group can use a specialized language if each member of the group has learnt and become fluent with it previously. So we've got English, we've got a universal language already, and most people here, at least most people in this group, can speak it already and understand it fairly fluently. If you want to develop new language, that's a problematic thing, I think, for me.
Whoa, more
unless it's a
problem.
computer language, maybe. But then the people using it,
Or a cartoon. Cartoon.
Yeah.
people
Let's
using
say you
it,
had a program, you can speak to the program, it translates what you say into a cartoon.
what I'm trying to say is only the people who are using it will be fluent with it.
Of course.
Just
They
watch
learn.
it. Alex, just download it and watch it and discuss it afterward. Before you even taste the porridge, you're telling us that the temperature doesn't seem quite right to you.
I don't know. He was talking about something else, I think. But Joel, yeah. What are you thinking?
Language is a word, and languages evolve over.
Yeah, I'm talking about the evolution into the 21st century that we haven't even touched, because we are all fogies talking in old terms, and Heiner is another one of those. You know, all that, if you went and talked to a 30-year-old out there on the streets today or in a disco, you'd be lost, Alex.
Yeah,
and I
well,
would be as well to a certain extent. So we've
that
got to come up
explains.
to speed.
That explains why we're attracted to people who speak the same language. That's all.
I think that's a one, a procrastination, 2, sarcasm, and it's not helpful.
It's true though.
Okay. Yeah. Let's see what Joel had to say. He had some thoughts here.
Come on, guys, it's open mic time. Chime in.
Go for
Say
it.
something. Kayla.
I get what you're saying, Alex, about the computer systems, but that's what they thought in the 70s. That once we had a computer network linking us all together, that we would all become in harmony. But all that social media did was bring out the worst in people. Everybody thought they had the opinion, right to be right, even without knowledge. Right to an opinion, showing a lack of knowledge, and then you're not allowed to have that lack of knowledge pointed out. All it done was it's broken down society. We thought it would work with MySpace and then Facebook and then TikTok and Snapchat and Tinder and other things. It hasn't. All we did was try to pander to the emotional side and go for all the good, all the good, all the good, none of the bad. We can't have any of the bad because that makes us hurt. As I've said a few times, the people just don't like the bad and will always pander to the good. So you need people who can show them why the bad needs to be part of their life, or at least the experience of it. So it's just unfortunate that the people who would work like that are going to be people like us. Well, if there's going to be people like us, then we're the only ones that really need to maintain that system. And one of the things that Jack Fresco, the guy who done the Venus project, wanted was that his towns and cities be networked by computers. But who would be the people inputting those variables? Well, the people with the science knowledge, the people that's looking at the plants. It just needs a networked system that takes the variables of economics in and passes it on to the rest of the network. We've got a world where the variables of what we can grow changes based upon the environment. So knowing what's being grown where and how it's all going to affect everything else is something that's relatively basic to put in. All you need to do is put in your area's current variables and then put that into the system. And the system would then inform everybody else of the current state. But we don't need to do this on an individual personal level, but we do kind of need people who are going to be willing to maintain such a system on a community level so that all the other communities can have their inputs. One of the things we do in the West is endlessly bury things. How many rubbish dumps do we have which are landfills? How much resources have been buried just because they couldn't get the price they wanted? Those resources could have gone to a great many uses. I've seen windows taken out of England that are double glazing and just lost their seals. That would have been good perfectly anywhere else in the world and just relatively cheap enough to move them there. We could have given other people those resources in that manner as a useful thing, but we chose not to. And part of the reason of this is people not knowing what's available as rubbish. We have the old saying, one man's rubbish is another man's treasure. How much treasure have we buried that is just useful for our societies because of the economics? Because somebody couldn't make a profit from doing it. Might have been able to transport it at a relative cost. Using people to transport things across the world and slower systems doesn't require anywhere near the resources as the really fast-paced economy we have. We could have done it slower and got the things to people to be used. And the system on that
Circular
scale
economy
would work.
Yeah.
But I don't think it will ever work on that 7.8 billion people. You just end up with 7.8 billion websites. Then which do people pay attention to? We gather to a few because of culture and because of what's favorable. You just need that to change for people to recognize the ones are telling them that things that will actually work.
So what is it that prevents all the rubbish from actually being used in a valuable way? Like,
Mostly profit.
Well, profit, we've touched upon that. So that's ideas, it's thoughts. So it's one tradition of thinking, which few people believe in very deeply. That's important. Most people today don't trust that tradition. Maybe they don't see clearly the alternative. So what if all those web pages, or a number of them, explore in detail the alternative? What would a real circular economy be like? What if you have experiments, certain cities? Josh would answer me by saying, this is already happening. Okay, so it's already happening. That's good. Why aren't we speaking about that? Why isn't that in social media? It seems that what we call social media, which you just described, is one kind of social media, which has been monetized in a pretty stupid way. And many people warned that it would go like this, and it has. And there's many other kinds of social media that's possible. So it's like, I don't really see what prevents. What is it that would prevent?
The same as what changes all TV. People's interest. What people are drawn to that causes pleasure.
Okay.
Work is hard. Understanding that work and the suffering that goes with it creates growth. It's not something everybody understands. One of the most valuable things you can do for yourself is to have a decent work life that keeps you physically active and mentally active, that physical nature and mental nature are going to be different for each individual. But when we go down into the lower parts of what would be the spectrum of society, they're not interested in those subjects. They want to go to work, they want to do their things, and then they want to enjoy a good time. They're not interested in these deep level conversations.
Okay,
They
so
just want to live a life.
but do they even know about it? That's I'm not so sure about that. Do they really know about circular economy, about the possibilities? Do they really know about those other kinds of minds that you talked about earlier? It seems to me that most people don't know about it because there's no focus on it. And because there's no focus on it, it's still no focus on it. So it's like a pattern that just replicates, and it's one stupid pattern that replicates like this. Yeah, give us the answer.
We can do a poll from the GCC to the general public, put it on Facebook. We've got some money in the bank account. We can use that to run a paid advert if we want to. You know, time we started doing these things and get some results in and see what we get instead of pulling figures out of the air. Complete. I'm going for a leak, guys. Back in a mo.
So one of the things that stop it is populism. Who do the majority favor and like? Well, they're going to listen to that person. They listen to the wrong people too often. Look at how many celebrities have been listened to over the years, yet you go into their actual knowledge of anything, and they should have never been in front of people saying anything to do with politics or science. They endlessly demonstrate vast ignorance with some of their ideas, and yet because the people like them, they like their ideas too. This is a problem with how we emote and how we favor things as positive and negative.
So does that mean you need to be more likable when you speak truth?
Problem in that is, what does our culture do? Demonize and mock what's better than them because they don't want to accept it.
Ah, yeah, that's a whole big issue as well, like envy and.
There's always a group. There's always a percentage of people who don't like your idea. When you talk about, in general, when you talk about what will make a better world, you find it's a big crowd of people who agree with you. Why are the politicians still handing out money to the corporations who are raping the planet? Follow the money. So if the websites, if the people get their act together by adding a couple of friends to a web page and a link that joins the network into a louder voice, it changes the situation. You start to see that the 80% of people who want a better world think that adding 2 friends is not too much effort to get something off the ground, and it's worthwhile venture. It's not going to cost you anything except time and attention. And that the value in there is part of the core values system, the emergence network. Over.
So is there a way that one could do this, which is very interesting, that's very engaging to participate in? Sort of like when you participate in a video game, there's something stimulating about just participating. Yeah, you're playing a role. So
and the only part of the role is to add 2 friends to that page. That's your part.
That's more.
Well, there is more, but that is the vital part that you play, adding 2 friends to that page. Once you do that, once people understand that, it'll take off by itself. You don't need to do anything else, but you can pretty up your page if you want to. If you've got something interesting, whack it on your page.
I think you need something else, don't you? I mean, that's why we mentioned that you need to have.
Sounds like MySpace.
AI. It's AI is taking over. The internet's becoming one big platform, right? So all we need to do is have our pages up If you haven't got your page up, you're not part of the scene. You're not getting counted. You're not getting found in searches, and the information you have isn't being shared. So, you know, Sam's one person who put a lot of pages up, and others, but they're not linked in any cohesive manner. All the people with pages haven't got them linked in any cohesive manner. My suggestion was just to use the URL. Over.
But the pages themselves are not enough. You need to have people who consciously deliberate on these things and test them out in practice. And there's certain experiments of such circular economy that was mentioned happening in practice, and it's done in a way that is interesting, that is engaging, and you need to have roles, maybe even roles where those shamans or those mystics can come into roles which are more likable, rather than them being rebels against the system. It feels like that's also a part of the dynamic. That's, or maybe that's not the real shamans. I don't know. Maybe the real shamans are silent. But
the problem is 80% of the people in the world want a world free of war and hunger. But 80% of people on the internet are just there to play games and watch porn and make money and do marketing, and they sell stuff on Amazon. So we're we're very a small group of people beginning to emerge, and it might take a few years before it fully develops. My plan is not to get it going quickly, to let it take its time naturally and not try and force it on anybody. Invite people to take notice that we're only 82 friends and we're creating our own colourful, dynamic, cultural webpage that's specific to our region and our habits and our likes and dislikes, our hobbies, our interests, our scientific knowledge, and our friends, our close local friends, our permaculture likes. If you have something that's about hemp plastic, whack it on your page.
Well, you mentioned permaculture. How many times in the US presidential election did they talk about permaculture? You remember that? I watched all the 3 debates and the vice VP debate. I don't think the word permaculture was mentioned even once.
The lobbyists, because the lobbyists who donate money into Washington by the millions of dollars are lobbyists who are paid by large pharmaceutical corporations who manufacture fertilizers and weed killers and all that shit, and they don't want permaculture mentioned. Over.
But that's if that's their evaluation, it's a very short-sighted evaluation, and if you had permaculture in its full extent, I'm not talking about primitive permaculture. I'm talking about, let's say we had advanced permaculture that went through many different parts of society. Every single one of those CEOs in the pharmaceutical companies would benefit massively compared to today. I mean, they would have a quality of life that they wouldn't even resemble. They would spend time on things they would be really interested in, right? So it seems that this isn't actually discussed. It's like we're in this bubble where we think, oh, this is only what's possible. And we can only keep speaking about raising taxes or lowering taxes or make some changes in the law. Instead of, what if we reimagine the economy altogether? What if we reimagine community altogether? What if we reimagine social media altogether? What if we reimagine conversation altogether? Language itself, thinking itself. And what if we not only reimagine it, but actually use some of the ideas which have come out and which are very impressive, and then do this in practice and build models and build prototypes and begin doing experiments? Why shouldn't that be interesting? why shouldn't that be likable? I don't see any good answer to it. It's like, it just seems that the answer is just that we just haven't done it. And
Well,
that's freaking it. It's just that we haven't done it.
The answer is always the same. Follow the money.
Money is just an abstraction. We can have money in that system too, in a circular economy that's built around essence, values, and consciousness, evolution, and scientific evolution, and well-being. We could have a system like that. We could still have money.
The people who have already got money.
I pose a reasoning behind some of this.
Yeah, go
say 80% of the population don't want war. But at the same time, it's actually probably a bit more than that. All of those people would force their way of living onto everybody else. They don't get that there's other people who want to live complete and utterly different ways of life. So those same 80% of people are the same 80% of people that would go to war to force their way of life on someone else. Within that, why do the capitalists make money? What do they pander to? The people. They pander to what the people want, what they're most being driven to for pleasure, what tickles their ego the most, what makes them feel like the big monkey. This is all the things that they are pandering to so that they can make money.
So
it wouldn't work any other way.
So
the people have the value and they're taking advantage of that value. That value system is based upon more animalistic emotional desires than the intellectual understanding of them. When you believe your emotions to be fixed, it's part of who you are. You don't learn that it's actually your mind creating the emotions. I mean, you try and talk to any normal person about the real knock-on effects of the processes and the ways in which they're happening, and they don't like you because you're showing their natures, because you're showing them something about themselves they didn't know and understand. This is how the markets have made all their money. What are the things that make the money? Fashion. People will spend £1,000 on a pair of trainers that cost no more than £50 to manufacture, with every cost taken into account. Yet, because of ideas, they're willing to pay £1,000. How many things are there that people are willing to pay an extortionate amount of money for, which then completely harms all the people around them? How many times do people spend money to just look like the big man, to have a big house? Look, I'm successful, I've got a big house. But then what comes with those things? Those things wear out, they need replacing. You're constantly having to work to maintain things that don't actually bring you that much joy. They just pander to that initial emotional outburst, like shopaholics who go shopping just to buy things. These are things that have been manipulated, things that have been studied by psychology, and psychology gave that knowledge to the business world. I was sitting there all along going, how are we accepting this? This is intentional dark manipulation. You are manipulating the animal mind to profit at the expense of the people. The same goes with toys. Women are emotionally manipulated endlessly with regard to their children because it works and it's easy. Just tell a woman, buy this for your children. It's going to be great for them. They'll really love you. In reality, that thing's bad for the children and bad for our society. But because it's made into an idea of this is what you should do if you're a good mother, then so many people believe it. And as it's believed by more and more and more, it's easier for everyone to believe.
Okay, well, I think many people who are in that state, I'd say, let's call it a certain addiction to certain behaviors, they also at the same time are somewhat aware of it, right? I think that many of those parents, they, you know, in certain moments, you know, they don't want to live like that. But you mentioned something very interesting. You say if you point out the truth to a person about what's really happening with them, then they're not gonna like you. I think that there's something really interesting here, because what's going on in it? Is the obstacle here a fear of the unknown? Because I mean, I've been doing meditation for many years, and you know, it gradually dawned on me that I'm more or less completely mad, and that the mind is just racing, and I'm a victim of thoughts that come, and those come from impressions, etc., etc., etc. So it's this madness, and yeah, it's crushing to the ego. But is there a different way we could approach this? Like, so yeah, I mean, this seems like a very important question, because if we can't make it fun and we can't make it pleasurable,
We have to start right there
yeah, it couldn't
with the
scale.
children.
Yeah, the children have it very
We need to
naturally.
teach them to accept hardship, to accept the truth from others' perspectives, and to use those as lessons rather than feeling attacked. This can be taught at a young age, and then as adults, we wouldn't be having these interactions. It's not going to work as well for everybody as it does for somebody else. There'll always be a complete spectrum in what people achieve and what positions they will hold. It's just recognizing that this isn't an ego thing in most instances. The people who have ability have the ability. 80% of intelligence is genetics. All of the gift abilities, from synesthesia to ultimately high intelligence to sensory perception, being born with that innate understanding of those things is a gift given to a few so that they can teach the many how to do similar things. It takes processes to get to that point, and those processes are all part of a geometry. All of those people are a point on the spike of knowledge and in all the different spectrums. It's not their choice. They just became that thing because of some innate problems in existence, the driving functions that made their biology and chemistry work the way that it does, or their mind, that will drive them to do different things to the rest and to see and understand things. Knowledge changes perception. We can all learn different skills and how to be a better being, but there'll always be beacons who can show us something, but it's always understanding that they will have their own problems as well. They won't be perfect. They might have knowledge in one thing, but be a complete fool in another. I don't know much about the social world. Every time I look at it, I'm amazed at what people get up to and some of the parties they've had. Like learning of the traveller movement that went around England. I barely knew anything of it. And yet there was this entire subculture that travelled around the country with sound systems, just partying for the fun of it. And everybody that lived a normal life hated them for it. I didn't know that went on. So you can understand how things work and then completely miss entire parts of culture. Nobody's going to know everything. It's just recognizing when they do know something and to value it, or to teach, and to then teach others how to think in that way so the whole species can grow. But there will always be those that don't take the path.
Yeah.
Always.
But you said that there was a few who had this great knowledge. But
Genetics effects. So progressive histories of certain people from certain lineages doing activities, like wine tasters. They've got super smell. They can sense with their nose far better than anyone else. Is that because their own genetic history, the lineages they came from, had more people who used their nose to sense with. That sort of just genetic memory of having done more that activity more and more. Same goes with your eyes, your ears, your nose, your skin. Are some of the people born with these gift abilities just the descendants of people who have sustained spiritual practices for their entire lives and then had children?
Yeah,
Just passing on
exactly.
that
So
experience.
that's sort of the lineage of a certain wisdom through generations.
But it's also important to recognize it doesn't go direct to children. We know how genetics works, and it's almost a lottery between 4 different active things on every single line. So it's not always going to be the case where a highly knowledgeable and spiritual person is going to have a son or a daughter that is also exactly that, to that level. They might have some ability, but one of their descendants with combinations of yet more of those different lineages could happen to have even more ability than that initial case. It's just all part of the marvelous way of genetics and how having done changes them. Keep someone built a horn on their head from repeatedly hitting their head against the wall. They slowly built a horn. Obviously, that's going to be how all the other creatures ended up with such a thing. And their kids are born with such a thing because all their the entire history of it collected. We changed the shape, but science is using what I would consider only part of the coding. They see the separations, and when you don't see the separations and see it as a fluidic variance, you see that within that variance, within that coiled spiral of information, every single tiny microscopic step of it has capability of having programming from interactive histories. A descendant was stuck in a hard breathing area. All these people now have better to breathe in hard environments. Or just look at the people in the mountains. They spent lifetimes in the mountains so they can breathe better in the mountains. There's a tribe of people who do free diving continuously. It's part of how they get food. They're the greatest people at holding their breath in the world. Some of them capable of swimming for long periods of time, up to 20 minutes. This is all genetic history being passed on to descendants. Or you say genetic, it's just a good word to point at our physical coding, the things that makes us.
Yeah, there's a certain knowledge that's being transmitted from birth. It's like, well, what I'm thinking is that all the people that I know well, and maybe myself included, seems that we have within us many layers of understanding. It's like one part of us does not want war, and then another part of us engages in certain activities, and some of the really wise people can have great issues and problems that others don't, and they don't have any less problems with ego necessarily. So is it about sort of awakening that highest part of all people, or having a system that tends to stimulate people to their natural best intelligence, and then have a community that can appreciate and receive that? I'm just wondering if that's sort of a part of this fabric. Yeah, what are you thinking, Jasmine?
The rules and regulations on warfare have been considerably changed since 9/11. Prior to that, the rules and regulations of warfare, although they appeared to be equinimical, they weren't. They were still in favor of the victor, and the victor would set the terms of the acceptance of the surrender. Now, there were certain exceptions. Japan was one, Germany was another. These exceptions were put in place because it suited the Western world to use their territories as, or put a base on their territories to threaten the perceived threat of Russia, which is non-existent. This was just to manipulate people at home to allow the military to expand so that the military could go out and do the dirty work for the corporations. So that's another field that needs looking at, and the rules of engagement changed totally. When all other means of a solution have been exhausted, means just that, not just a little bit of a dilly-dally and well, they're not listening to us, so we better go and bash hell out of them. No way, horsey way. The whole rule system there is totally in favor of the winning side, which invariably means the European American coalition, the WASPs. That has to be changed, has to be looked at, studied by if at the very least, an MD lawyer, such as our I forget who's an MD in law on GCC. I seem to forget. Anybody know?
Doug.
Ah, that's the one. I wonder if he'd consider such a small project. I'm complete.
He knows where to find investors. He's got quite a list of people who do investing, Swiss companies and companies in the Netherlands and in Europe. I don't know about other places. I haven't spoken to him much about it, but there are an increasing number of corporations devoting a certain percentage of their investment, community investment funds, to ethical investments that improve the world and don't deplete resources.
And I would like to read some about that in the mainstream media. And I think that would interest people. If that story was told in the right way, it would be very interesting.
Well, the mainstream media will take notice of what's happening on the internet. If there's a trend developing on the internet, the mainstream media will pick up on it. They report what's happening, not what's about to happen or what people are dreaming about.
So it all starts in the human mind and human behavior and human interests, emergent from all over, and also social media on the internet. So where are the stories about those projects, and are they being told the way they could be told? And is there a simple way for people to engage creatively with that process from home, and will they get rewarded for it? And I think the answer is no. I don't see that system existing today.
There is rewards available. A local group hub will have a corporation donate a kiosk, which is a solar-powered charging station for their gadgets, and it's got advertisements around the top, right? Those advertisements pay for the kiosk, and the people in the town square come and charge their gadgets at the kiosk. It's called whatever the local people decide to call it. But that is donated by corporations who want to put their ads up. Now, the people in the local community who want to allow those corporations to do this will stipulate that they're not going to allow corporations who are doing nasty things to be part of the game. Only corporations that are doing the right thing, sustainable production
the
of
bad
goods.
things of corporation are in the darkness. It's
Well, they
only
are.
later that it comes into the light, and only then when its evidence is found.
It's happening, and things are changing. It's troubling that it's happening so slowly, but it is happening.
Most of the evidence has been destroyed.
When the corporations start bettering and deploying their systems to visibly make their operations clean, rectify the damage they have done, then they may have a platform. Currently, no corporation has any platform, especially the oligarchies and the money people, the banks. And the worst of all is one I'm not going to mention, because that's the biggest control that nobody ever talks about, the big white heavy lump in the room. It'll come up in due course, no doubt. So when somebody says that the corporations are cleaning up their act, like the Sugar Corporation, I say, boo-hoo. When somebody says, what's the other corporation country? It is the Sugar Corporation. That's one of them. There are other corporations, the oil companies, are showing that, look, we're researching into methods of greener energy production. And all they're doing is
creating more systems of
obfuscating.
profit.
Yeah.
So why can't you profit from that?
They're using less coal.
What is profit?
Profit is an abstraction.
Yeah,
They
but think
generate-
about it. Sorry, Alex. Give me
When
one
they
second.
get to zero coal, then we can talk.
Think
Till
about
then,
what
they are
profit
using
is.
coal. You have no idea what tonnage they put in the double entry book, do you?
Sugar farmers here. I live where there's a lot of sugar growing in North Queensland, and the
Can
sugar
we do
farmers
one thing
here,
at a time, please, Alex?
They're
Either we
using-
do oil or coal or sugar, one thing at a time. Don't skip
They're-
back and forth.
they're using their own bagasse, which is the offcut from the sugar cane, and they burn that to create electricity, so they don't have to use the grid power. Oh,
That's details, but what is profit? Profit's experienced value, right?
Can I come back
Isn't
to
it-
Alex? So
Isn't it related to
sugar
experienced
cane-
value, what people actually value?
hold on.
Let's
please.
not lose that thread, please.
The sugarcane roughage that comes out when the sugarcane has been squeezed and all the sugar juice has come out, normally is shredded to go back to the land. If we burn it, then we have to use fertilizer on the land to produce more sugarcane. So that's not a clean cycle, is it? No.
But
Yeah.
real clean cycles are being
The
explored,
detail
right?
is-
Right.
The
They
minute
won't-
detail is what that needs to be looked at.
Well, here's
Is
the
there
detail.
any one operation in that cycle which is not green? If it
Part
isn't,
part of the fine detail is the fact that they don't burn it all. They put some of it back onto the land. where
yeah,
they-
yeah. Okay, fine. Till I have the figures, I can't do. They shouldn't burn any of it.
Well, it was big news here when they started doing it.
And that's one farm in Australia. That's fine. What about India,
No,
China,
it's-
the
It's
West
100
Indies,
it's
Africa?
150 farms.
Yeah. A
But do
tiny
we-
drop in a
do-
mighty sugar ocean. Thank
Do
you,
we
Alex.
agree? Do we know that there are genuinely circular green economies? Aren't
They
there?
won't- They won't do it.
Okay, are there relatively circular?
If there's enough people.
Come on.
If there's
Are
enough
you
people-
seriously saying that, Jaswinder, that there's no such thing as any kind of circular economy in the world today?
Well, it's got to be.
No, completely green
I
circular.
know, not completely green, but something in that direction
Yeah,
could become completely green, right?
you know,
So
there
why
are-
the heck
there are-
aren't we talking about that? Why aren't we talking about that every single
There are-
fucking day? Can you
there
guys
are
tell me that? Why am I reading about that in the news, about what's lacking in that chain, and then all the competitions where people can come from home and come with ideas and be rewarded for those ideas
Because the
and have an
companies-
attention economy around it?
Because the companies show you an aspect of their operation,
Yeah.
then you think, well, yes, they're doing some good. and they'll improve. And that's just the cover story. The rest of it is dirty.
But why can't we get the stories about the real work that's being done and get those stories
Yeah,
in a really
okay, if you read
engaging way?
about the guy who's built a system for cleaning up the oceans, and he's a
Yes.
one-man band, and he's getting other people on board, and he's opened up a charity. Yeah, there's some cleaning going on. And that's not a completely green operation either. Once you've collected the plastic, what happens to it after that? Now there are reports that we've got some worms and bacteria and maybe some fungi that eat the plastic. I've never seen any of that on any reports where a mountain of plastic is being reduced by some microbe.
Okay, let me reformulate the question. Do we have a $1 trillion industry putting money into this research?
Oh,
do we have 24 hours a day news coverage of these experiments?
Oh,
do we have the ability for people from home to follow all the data and come with their own ideas and do their own local contributions? Do we have that? Do we have a reward system?
Can I just get in one little sentence?
The answer is no.
I can honestly say no.
Yes, that's true. And what I'm saying is, why not?
Because there is no such fucking creature out there.
Because we're not even talking about it. We're talking about all kinds of other stuff.
Every corporation, take the city of Wolverhampton here, only 250,000 people, 250,000. We used to sell our rubbish, take it in the bins, in the lorries, pack up the lorries, 40-ton containers, drive them all the way to a port, a city port, could be Bristol, all the way to China. China stopped it. Then we start selling it, giving it and paying India to sort it out and use it. And after a while, India said, we can't handle anymore. So now, back to square one, landfill. You see, the problem is not minute. It is immense. It's cheaper for a small city like this to move the problem somewhere else. So when the city of Wolverhampton logo comes up on their, whatever it is, the Wolverhampton City News magazine, it's online, and they give you all this bump of how we're doing this and how we're cleaning things up and how we're improving construction. It's, as the Germans would say, baloney. Yes,
well,
Joel, your turn. Go ahead.
We were going to talk about the profit part of that. Most of that's done for profit. It's possible to actually cycle a great deal of things, but the economic ideas stops it. What I was going to go on to with profit is profit's taking more out of something than what the system requires. You require food, you require housing. In the sense of having those things, they don't need to cost what a lot of people make them cost. So there's levels of pay that is so utterly distortionate compared to the relative input they do for both our people and the planet. There's a great deal of things that those people are doing that are highly profitable for them and taken away from everybody else so that they can live their life of luxury.
Yeah.
Virtually no input. Take shareholders who have, that's all they do. They effectively just own slaves. If you think about what a slave is, it's someone you own that you're taking their outputs from and selling it so you make an additional profit. In shareholding, you own part of a company which has employees that are outputting, and then you take a share of the dividends. Where's the difference in the functional nature of that? I see none. I see it as being virtually identical. Just with shareholding, you get to pretend that you don't own slaves. You own part of the business. You're not taking the merit of other people for your own benefit. Of course not. That's not what you're doing at all. What did they do for the company again, other than lend them a bit of imagined money? that they probably got from doing something that had imagined value that was actually negative for our species and the planet.
They probably bribed the local executive on the city council to get the contract, give him a backhander and promise him something every month. That ain't gonna work, Alex.
Well, why couldn't a genuinely green industry be profitable? I still don't understand that. Let's say you have a
Let's look at what the
genuinely
genuine
circular.
stuff did. What did we have? We had a genuine attempt at wind energy. The oil companies bought all those things up and then were the ones reaping the rewards. So the people who wanted to do good were bought out quickly. Didn't take that long. They were just like, oh, profit for us. And then they sold those green energy projects and ideas onto people who wanted to make profit. It's not hard to see what
But
happens.
that's all from a scarcity mindset.
No, it's from I'm greedy, I want this.
No,
I'll
it's
do
from
you
a
all.
scarcity mindset.
No,
that
no,
says,
let me give you
we
an
can only
example.
have this little thing. I can only have.
Glenn, calmness.
Listen to the point, guys.
Look, YouTube, up until recently, was an independent company. It was doing a lot of good, and it was a social company. And Google bought it some years ago, and Google has monetized every aspect of YouTube. Okay? Same goes for, what do you call that, Facebook, Twitter. Facebook works with Google, and Google and Facebook are monetizing every operation of, Google is helping Facebook every operation. There are adverts galore everywhere, and they're targeted. If I look for a bathroom suite for the next few days, umpteen companies are bombarding me with their bathroom suites.
The worst point of that is they're controlling people's speech by taking
As
away
well.
the monetization, by using the variables of their watches to change how frequently they are
This is
viewed,
why I'm
making
saying,
the unpopular statements hidden.
I put a link in chat box two or three times now, which was given to me by my very good friend who's looking at me in a black top. And I watched the series once already. It really behoves everybody on GCC to watch that series. It doesn't take long. And it gives you a deep insight into human psychology and the whole shebang of American society, which the whole world holds up an example of a free economy. It isn't.
No, it's a scarcity-based economy.
No, it is a slave-driving economy. It wants
Scarcity.
slaves all
That's
the
it.
time, everywhere, including slaves in its own country. The blacks, the browns, people from other countries, India, China, wherever, Thailand, Russia. And if you think it's the government that runs the country, forget it. It is people with immense amounts of money who manipulate each and every member of the government, especially the cabinet. The United States cabinet, I can honestly say, no, I can't. It's second in line to being the most corrupt after the UK cabinet currently. India's coming in at a very close third, and it's a close run. It's a very close run race as to who's number 2 and 3.
Okay, but we've gone through all that. But
We've gone through all that, yes.
Yeah, a million times.
We don't have a deep understanding. What I mean is I know who my local MP is. My councillor has just changed. I will get to know him. This year, I will make it my business to go to council meetings where observers are allowed. This year, I shall be asking my councillor these very questions we are putting up here. Why is our city, for example, doesn't have there is a National Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children. Why doesn't this society have a program in place that is proactive and actually look at the pupils, primary pupils coming in at the age of 5 or nursery at the age of 3, and see if any of them have already been abused. It's not difficult. It's only a half-hour test per child. So you can do 30 pupils, 1 half-hour session, 40-minute session, set up, do, tidy up. That's it. And you've got
That's a
all the
what if
information you need.
question.
So
That's a
why are
what if
these,
question.
in medicine today is proactive. I know because 50 years ago, proactive medicine was coming and it was targeted to people my age. Come in, we want to check you up. And they still do that. Every couple of years, they send me a letter. I go in, they do a full medical, they do blood samples. And if there's anything like vitamin B12 is low, vitamin K is low, vitamin D is low, whatever. And if I have any complaints, it's dealt with. It's a half-hour session. And that half-hour session saves a lot of other money. Alex, all yours.
Well, if I send you $100, will you make it P2P?
Send me the $100 and then I'll answer your question.
But again, I feel we're getting a little into the weeds because
So,
we mentioned
I
how
haven't
all this is
finished.
driven by
Glenn,
profit.
Glenn, I know
Okay,
you're the moderator,
get to
or you were.
get to
This
it.
is free mic. Anybody
I
can.
know, but let's try to get to the gist of the issue.
I am. That's all I'm interested in. The rest is small talk.
What
Foreplay.
about the ideas that Joel mentioned?
I
What about the
just gave you the
scarcity
ideas.
mindset?
I've just given you the minutiae of the ideas. Who do you talk to? And the equivalent of that is the same the world over. All the systems that are outside Russia and inside Russia are run on the European standard. There's no difference. Apart from
It's
the
a lousy
dictatorship.
standard because it hasn't. I don't hear permaculture even mentioned in the political debates, and that tells me that the political debates are so ancient.
Who is your MEP? Do you know who your MEP is?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I know a few of their names.
No, who is the MEP for this area is Mr. Bird. Okay. Now, if I want to know about permaculture in the UK and Europe currently, I would send him a letter or an email to get some information. I could send an email to my MP and ask him to send that to the various departments. What is happening with permaculture? Can I have some information? I don't have to rely on Facebook. I don't have to rely on any science paid for surveys by corporations or anybody else. The government has their own statistics. The CIA have their own statistics. The FBI, the American government. There are various departments who are interested in anything that can be utilized to control local and global populations for the benefit of the rich.
Or that's where the scarcity comes in.
There's
just
no scarcity.
There's where the scarcity is. Because
no, there is no
if they didn't have scarcity, they wouldn't say for the benefit of the rich. They would say for the benefit of everyone.
The caused scarcity. Scarcity does not exist. It is caused for slavery. Yeah.
Yeah,
Ethiopia is not being bombed because of the wrong color of the people. There is black gold under Ethiopia, and that territory is a border, whatever you call it, a safe zone for Saudi Arabia and Sudan as well. So the Western manipulation of these countries in the Middle East is leading to local wars, which could spill over into global wars. Plus, you've got the Suez Canal to be protected constantly. No wonder the Americans have got a fleet out there in the Gulf all the time. That canal cannot be closed. So you're looking at geopolitical games here. And if you are not getting the right information, you are getting the wrong information, which keeps you going in a spiral circle till you give up.
And that's what the social media is doing now. It's the wrong information being transmitted to almost everyone. There's hardly any real
I'm not
political
interested
debate.
in the wrong information. I'm interested in the sources that have the right information. The National Office of Systems, Surveys, Ordnance Surveys, whatever you want, your local government will have that information independent of every other country. They only rely on their own information. The Medical Association produces their own feedback systems for what they want and give it to the government. Every 10 years, there's a consensus in every country that the next 10 years are planned upon. The population size, the groupings by age, how many schools will we need? What level of food will we need? All systems and all surveys are conducted and given to the local governments by
But
the
you've
civil,
also said,
by the civil
yes,
service.
but you've also said that's a part of a global corporate structure which is exploitative. And what I'm
Hold
getting
on,
to is
you made a
that
point.
is again based on an even larger structure of ideas.
Don't rush ahead. One point at
about
a
what's
time.
possible.
One point at a time. The civil service of the civil service of every country has to produce accurate information for that country, which may or may not be misconstrued by the elected government, or for that matter, the dictatorship government, okay?
Or the media, or the social media.
The media tends to manipulate it and gets caught out because there are people out in the open who have access to that information. If you want to know about a company in the UK, you would go to the company's register house. I think one search is something like £20, and a year's search is a couple of £100. So if you are a CEO of a company or a manager, you would have access to every company's records, including charities, from the company's house. So if you run up a company, say SOUK, and you go along on the internet, onto the website, company's house, and do a search, pay them the fee or a subscription, you can get accurate information. That information is solidly accurate. Nobody can deny it. Now, once you've had it,
available?
Hold.
Is it
Once
publicly
you,
available?
Glenn, who is a commodities manipulator, for argument's sake, you get the information and you produce a chart and you say, oh, look, SO's profit margins have been increasing. And all of a sudden, these profit margins are going to drop. So all those people who have shares in SOUK, you send them all a letter or an epistle or a text, and you say, SO is going to drop in 6 months' time. Sell your shares. Sell the shares, come down. You buy all those shares, a one-man band. 6 months later, the shares haven't dropped, or they've dropped slightly because you bought them, and they start climbing up again in a few months' time. You sell them for a huge profit, shorting the system. Illegal, happens everywhere. That's what the banks did 10, 12 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. They do it every now and often. It's called milking the cow.
Yeah, and it's very uninteresting. So why are we speaking about it?
You've forgotten where we started. That's your problem.
We started
your
with
memory
the question,
is not my problem.
No, we started with the question, what world would we like to live in? You described this information isn't publicly available, Jaswinder. That's the problem. It's not publicly available, a lot of it. Not only that, there's not a social movement that promotes these ideas and makes them accessible.
Stop. 1 point. Not publicly. Stop.
Scarcity.
Take the first point. I'll take the first point first. I'm not going to have umpteen points. Not publicly available. I will reiterate the part where it's publicly available. Pay the money, get the information.
That's not publicly available. Publicly
You mean
available is
it's
for
not?
free.
You're sitting at a PC, just Google on that. Whatever information you want, Google will give you the appropriate department. You may or may not have to pay a fee for what you want. Okay? If you don't pay the fee, you don't get the information. You pay the fee, you get the information. It's available.
That's not available. That's a block.
The Times UK has become a pay-as-you-go wall. It has a paywall. It's no longer a free internet newspaper.
What I'm
Most
speaking
newspapers are
about
not
is
free anymore. So when you start bickering on one little point, you are wasting a lot of time.
okay, let me get to the point then. If we have a genuine green economy, which is completely sustainable, or we have projects that work in this direction, which have made progress and could make even further progress, then the knowledge about these sort of initiatives and these kinds of systems should be freely available to everyone, and freely available in a form that's easily accessible and interesting, and where people could add also to this from home in some kind of way. And I don't see that existing today.
Then you're going round in circles because
yes,
your
and I'm
memory.
getting to the main point, which is the overlay of ideas which this entire system seems to be based on, and which is a very scarcity-based mindset about only this little is possible because this little is what we happen to have tried. And in the meanwhile, there's a whole world of knowledge that exists about genuine permaculture, genuine green practices, genuine
Going round
value
in
maximization.
circles. You are going round in circles.
But
let me make it very short. Anybody who sets up anything that's totally green today, tomorrow it will be bought up and monetized for profit. It will no longer be green.
Then it's not genuinely green. That's just the same old BS.
You're
That's
going
not
in
the thing.
circles.
I know. So why don't we move beyond those circles? That's what I'm getting to. If we have discussions where we highlighted those subjects and those projects.
Have you got the money to break the circle?
If we make it interesting enough, people will pay. We can have
Why should they
crowdfunding.
believe you over their own government?
Because they see demonstrated examples of systems.
No, they don't. The government and the media have told everybody that we're the bad guys, that we're trying to take away their way of life.
Yeah, but that's just nonsense.
No, it's not. Not to them. That's what they perceive and understand. You're trying to destroy their way of life, the way that they think that they should live, the way they have their houses, the way that their children are educated. You are destroying literally the entire abstract
How
world.
am I destroying their way of life if there's a genuine
Because this is what
circular
they're
economy?
used to. They don't have the understanding that these things are bad. They just, this is the way of life. This is how it works. That's what they know. And you're trying to take that away from them. So
it's
to
all
them,
about,
you're posing destroying their world.
well, but that's an incredibly irrational idea.
It is.
Yeah, obviously.
No,
obviously.
That's
If
the
you have
rationale today.
If you have an island which is a sustainable circular economy, they won't even need resources from other places. And they can easily have value.
One of the things with rationality is it requires knowledge. You can't be rational on knowledge you don't have. So when they're having their rationality prevented from having the knowledge, how do they know to understand the rationality without it?
Exactly. And then we're once again back to what do we fill social media with? What do we fill the conversations with? What do we choose to focus on? And if we endlessly continue focusing on everything that's wrong, that knowledge will never be received. And you're going to have small
projects. Knowledge has actually been said
projects.
by cultures for thousands of years. Look at
God.
Buddhist society, look at Hindu society. Each of them have had the wealthy. I mean, virtually every war throughout history has been caused by some sort of distortion in the resources, to the point of somebody turns around and goes, I've had enough. I mean, we used to call the terrorists freedom fighters because they were fighting for their personal freedom. And then over a few years, the media massively distorted what we used to call terrorism, which used to be defined as governments through fear and intimidation, to people who are using whatever means they had available to them to scare everybody into following their ways. Do you see how clever that manipulation was? People trying to fight the enemy for their freedom, what they saw, to people who are trying to attack your way of life. They weren't in the initial case, they just didn't want the interference of the Western cultures. And in reality, they were fighting for their cultural freedoms, which the capitalistic models were trying to take away. People don't accept that. They see the capitalistic models as being the righteous people. They didn't ever pay attention to the reality of what's gone on around them. They're too busy going, I'm having a good life. I'm so good, I don't hurt anybody. Whilst their militaries, their business leaders, their politicians were all out in other countries doing crime, completely corrupting cultural ways, paying off
And then
military
their
advisors
doorsteps
and
as
everything
well.
else.
Each city has its own government, local council doing crimes right on your doorstep, right before your very eyes, and you don't even know
But of
it.
course they're not being done. Your government wouldn't do that to you now, would they?
No,
It's
of
just,
course not.
no,
You
the
seem
American
like a nice
government didn't medically test on their own people in the 70s. That never happened. But we proved it. How
But
many
it's failed.
conspiracies have been proven that the governments did against their own peoples?
Yep.
Looking throughout history, we've seen a lot of revolutions take place, political and social. And so when the seesaw tips, it means that people have moved to one end of the seesaw, and the council members and the politicians are watching the seesaw. They change their tune when they see these movements happening. They're
Money,
watching.
money, money, it's so funny.
So
in
basically,
the world.
if the psyche of the general population shifted, then those economic incentives would shift along with it.
I
Do you
got an
understand?
idea. I got a light bulb idea. Why
Okay.
don't we wake up the general populations into a higher level of thinking? Then they can make up their own minds, get their own information. What a brilliant idea that is. Do you think there might be something like a general crappy corporation or general conversation of crappy stuff that might be interested in taking up such an idea? Glenn.
That's a good idea.
Hey! Let's sail that one.
Yeah, I think we found the answer.
Okay, there's 7.8 billion humans.
Well, even if it's
Are we
just
all
a
going to make them
thousand,
go through the same process? How's
well,
that going to work?
no,
They
why?
already fight it.
No, they don't have to do the same process.
Well, if we're going to have them have all the same knowledge, all the same perceptions, to think and act the same ways, they have to go through identical lives.
No,
How is that possible?
That's not going to happen.
Let's look at this from a knowledge perspective. Sorry, Alex, 1 second. When a doctor walks down the street, what does the doctor see? Medical doctor, that is. They'll see everybody's illnesses. Engineer walks down the same street. What do they see? They see all the engineering stuff. So their perceptions in that moment instantly are different.
Yep.
You're not going to have them act and think the same because they have different knowledge. You can't make them the same. You can only teach them to be strong beings. In some instances to make their own decisions, and in others to recognize higher knowledge.
Yeah, that's what we're talking about, right?
I want to check out. I want a minute, half a minute, less than half a minute to check out, because
I've got dinner too, so
Glenn,
it's good time.
Glenn talked about the answer a minute ago. We're thinking about this answer. And I was going to mention that the answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind.
So's my fart. You want to smell it? Sorry about that. I couldn't resist that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, watch that series, Alex. Download it tonight. The
I
link's in
also
the chat.
I also have to log out, but I really
I have to warn you, Glenn, if you're going to take on a project like that, it is a 24/7, 365 operation. And you've got to put your heart and soul in it. And it means you have to attend meetings. It means you have to meet some very important people and treat them like children and grill them, just like this idiot is doing here. I'm just practicing. I'm going to go downtown again, talk to some very important people while I'm dressed in my pajamas.
yeah, thanks for that. I think that's right. And by the way, it does seem clear that whatever it could be, it will have to be something that allows for a vast difference of ways of understanding.
Last but not least, Glenn, do not be tempted by the smell of money, nor the smell of very attractive young ladies who will come wafting and sit next to you and say, "Do you want a good time, sailor? No, I got to do this. No, come. I'll show you something you've never, ever had before." While she puts her hand straight down the front of your toilet and squeezes your lemon while you're sitting at the bar drinking your Cinzano.
Yeah, for sure.
It's
not easy. It's a 24/7, 365 project, as you say. Yeah, definitely.
Well, I'm glad to see you're not chickening out. That's good. Good, man.
But one thing, Joel, don't you think if, let's say you had 1,000 people who could really evolve, wouldn't that indirectly change a lot more?
You have to think of it in
For you to have
mathematical
1,000
terms.
people, as Joel has just intimated, it's going to be a full-time job for you to recruit, argument's sake, 100,000 people to get the 10% you want, and then you're going to have to train them. Your disciples will be your responsibility, and then you're going to have to show them how to think. And the new way of thinking will open up their minds and make them totally honest and open-minded. And they won't like you for it, and they might leave you because they become independent. So you've got to have a hook to keep them hooked. What are you going to offer them? If they don't have a puzzle to solve ready and waiting, and you haven't told them that it's ready and waiting and it's there, and somebody says to them, "Forget him, come and work for us. We need a man of your brain power." They're gone. Happens every day. We call them universities. Cheers.
Exactly. Well, it wouldn't necessarily be a problem if they really did attain
There is no problem.
insight.
It's the construction that's the difficulty.
Yeah,
Who's
and
going to
the
put the time in?
teaching.
Who's going to do all this chattering for over 3 years to get to a stage where we are starting to again say we want to do something concrete next year, which is only 3.5 days away now.
To answer your question, Graham, there's one thing you always need to remember, and that's the spectrum of interaction. Even if you create the ways, not everybody's going to follow the paths. If you think about, how well do you know the geometry maths, like sine theta? If it's sine theta's 0 on the 80 and the 0 degrees, and 1 on the 90 and the 270 degrees. Well, the one is primarily most of the population. and where most of the population points tends to pull the rest of the population. But there is always the people on the outer sides. What about the 1 degrees angle? A tiny, 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 tiny fraction of people go down that path, and that's the development paths. There will always be that way. You can't escape that, but you can teach the people in general to be strong and wise, and to recognize when people are truly trying to do something for global good. And quite a lot of people do recognize that. That's why in the spiritual religions like Buddhism and Hinduism, those who travel around without wealth, who try to live the most minimalistic, true sense of the truest sense way of life, they're highly respected. A monk that lives in isolation on their own, barely subsisting with hardly any food, is very highly respected in Buddhist traditions. Yeah, in the West, the opposite way of life is what's respected. Both of those ways of life ultimately have the same relationship to that sine theta. Only a tiny fraction of people become ultimately wealthy, and only a tiny fraction of people choose to be that minimalistic, to dedicate themselves, their mind and their body to everybody else. One's focus is themselves and their immediate family. The other is everybody's good, whether that is through their own self-development and just that. Unfortunately, you need to be either side of those spectrums are pulling on the middle. The middle's listening to either side, and it's what side are they listening to? The light side or the dark side? And you start to understand the interactions, you see how those things work, and that what the religions and everybody speak of as sheeple are the people who listen and then follow. And then you've got all the people that go throughout that entire range. On the very tip of the range, they're all the people that are trying to sway them either way or another. It's getting people to see populism isn't always relative to who should be listened to. Sometimes the unpopular ideas are the ones that should stand out more, because it's what gets us to look at ourselves in the mirror.
Yeah, thanks for that. And yeah, great insights. I gotta log off, guys, but really enjoyed today.
Good chat.
So good one. Bye. I think maybe I have to end the session. Okay, are we finished? Yeah, okay. Bye, guys.
You can't end it. Sam is the moderator, so you can go. It'll keep running.
Okay, good.
Not true. I made Glenn the host. So
Did you?
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Should I push the
when I
end
said
button?
Glenn, you're the host, I gave Glenn the host.
Yeah,
So
okay.
You're gonna shut it down now?
Well, I do have to prepare for my meeting in about half an hour.
So the answer is yes, you want us to piss off.
No, you guys can go on for another 29 minutes if you like.
Okay, thank you, we will.
I have to go, and Thais is waiting.
Back. Hey,
Yeah, and he shared a great link in
Hey,
the
Glenn,
chat.
if you want, you could make Tees or just Winder host, and that way when you leave, the session will not end.
Yeah.
Oh, he's shaking his head. He's had his meal for today.
I'm just saying technically it's possible.
Yeah, good. Well, anyway,
right click
take care,
on your,
guys.
Wait. Right click on your name and make me host before you shut
Right
down.
click on just Winder's name.
Right click on Jaswinder's name.
Yeah.
And make him host.
There you go. You're host.
Whoa! I got it! I got the power at long last.
Got the power at the end. Yeah. Bye, guys.
See what happens when people get power?
Yeah. Oh, Jaswinder is powerful.
No. Only a very small portion of me is powerful, Thais. And I'm not telling you which portion.
At the moment, you're powerful.
See, Joel's disappeared as well. Coward. Can't take the pace.
You,
Good-
you can
good
invite
player.
Joel now.
Huh?
You can invite him.
Go ahead, invite him back.
If he comes, is a second question. But
Well, that's up to him. I'm not all that. It's entirely up to Joel. He's his own man. If he's deemed that he has to go, he has to go.
well, I was cooking in the meantime, so my potatoes are ready. But I've
Joel,
eaten other things.
Thijs, why are you living on your own?
Because I am alone. Yeah.
What happened to the wife?
Oh no, I'm always single. Since
So after
since
3
my
wives,
birth,
you decided to live on your own.
I have a sister and living somewhere else in Amsterdam. So nice tiny family.
I take it your sister has a husband.
Yeah, and 4
Where's
children.
your husband?
Say again.
Where is your ex-husband?
I don't know. What do you say? I don't
Where's
understand.
your ex-wife?
My sister has, well, she lives in Amsterdam, 4 children,
No, you.
and
You went-
divorced.
The woman you
uh,
married, where did she go?
What? I am single since I'm born.
Why?
I'm single. Oh, well, just happened like that.
Are you a Buddhist or something?
What?
A Seventh Zen Buddhist or a Catholic?
No. I'm just the way I am.
How many
Independent and
how many
free.
girlfriends- how many
Family
girl-
was not forcing me to marry, so I was
How many
free.
girlfriends have you had?
0.
Whoa!
Maybe one.
How many boyfriends have you had?
0.
You work on a
Just-
farm?
I'm living in the metropolitan area.
Okay, that's nice to know.
Yeah,
Forgive
I'm
me for
very
being so
strict
direct,
in.
but it's a
Yeah.
good way of getting information out fast. So now I have a better understanding of why you are lonesome and shy and
I'm
all.
always alone. I've been alone, and
How old
it's
are
okay.
you now?
What I don't hear you well enough. Sorry.
How old are you?
I'm becoming 65 coming January 11th. 65.
Would you like me to find you a nice Indian girlie?
No, not at all.
An Indian woman?
Not at all. No, not at all.
Okay.
No, I don't want anybody to interfere.
Fine,
So
that's okay. I'm
It
okay with that.
depends on what I meet in my local area, and that's all.
Yeah, there must be Indians in Amsterdam. Or where
No,
are you?
no
sorry?
need to be
Which city are you in?
thinking about that. So that's the advantage of my culture. So before my family became as pushy as you are now, I was already wise enough to stay alone.
Which city are you in?
I'm in between Den Haag and Rotterdam, and the city is called Delft. So I call it the center of a metropolitan area with 2 major suburbs. And the suburbs are Rotterdam and The Hague.
Yeah, there are gurdwaras in that area, and there are mosques, and there are Jews, and there are all sorts of people in that area.
I know. I'm very keen on what happens in the area. So being alone helps me more, helps me to steer better. Not being,
one very pertinent personal question. Have you written your last will and testament?
No. That it will be okay because all the money will go to my sister if I die.
How many children does she have?
4.
Jolly good. 2 girls, 2 boys.
1 girl, 3 boys.
Marvelous. Good. Yeah. Excellent. Well, Thijs, it's 1937 over here. It's 2037 over there. So, sorry, I do apologize. Do you have any questions for me?
Well, I am interested actually through you in Wolverhampton. So the question is just keep us updated on your intention to go to the meeting places of your democratically chosen representatives. So it's interesting. You were going to the council, you said,
Yeah,
and
sure,
being a
I can,
witness of their deliberations, you
I
said.
can update you on those. Yeah, sure, no problem.
So that's the question.
Well,
Can you
a
keep
lot
us
of the
updated
a
on
lot of the
any?
communication nowadays is electronic, so I can always put it in the chat as well.
Yeah, I'm interested because, well, circular economy is being introduced here. I'm kind of active. I'm always at my way active, so not pushing, but also if I find things, I know where to bring the knowledge. So that's what I do. So if I know what interests you through, if you tell us what you experience in what you do in Wolverhampton, you already said you are in the interfaith group, meeting people from other faiths. These are interesting things because these are harmonizing society, stabilizing society, and I like to know these phenomena.
Do you have any
Because
personal
I have a remote background in Christianity, and I'm close to a group Christians here now living ground floor near my flat in a separate building. And because of COVID, I cannot meet them.
Do you have any personal
I
questions?
need the social, because if you ask about being married, actually it means about how are your social relations? So there's a group of people that organized the meal every Friday, and I was there since they started organizing it.
Good.
So it's a group of people. Children come there. Also, say unmarried women with children, so that they are divorced. Everything comes there. Also, males like me, never married, some are divorced, and so the whole bunch is there. And it's 3 families and 5 or 8 singles living in one building, and so it's a nucleus. And they were willing to be that nucleus for this. So they opened up their heart, the garden. Now it's closed because they have COVID. They were out of it, and now it's, so in the Netherlands, it's within the Christian community that COVID is striking. I was going to a church every Saturday for coffee, also for socializing, meeting people that I would otherwise never meet. But when I saw they didn't distance enough, long time ago, say in April, I left that place and didn't go back anymore because I didn't keep distance. So I expected the Christian community to get a huge problem with COVID, and they have it now. So they didn't have it a long months. They were able to be out of that system because they're a closed community, more or less. So that's it. So no questions, and you can close the session.
Okay. Thank you. Can I be very rude and ask you to leave so I can have a private chat?
I can leave. I will. I
Okay.
have to find out. Take some time to find the leave button. Oh yeah, I found it. Bye. See you again.
Thank you, Thijs. Bye. Hello, Sam.
I'm just doing stuff in the background, getting ready for my next session. But you wanted a private session with me?
Can you turn the recording off, please?
Hang on one second.